Morning once.
Well, in my days, Mike, it used to go on all night. But
that's what I say. 2 a.m. We went all through the night. We even had chips for supper.
Yeah.
Just about to go live, guys. In fact, we are live now.
Morning once.
Well, in my days,
Right. Streaming.
We're gonna make a start, everybody. So if colleagues can mute your audio if you're not speaking, that'd be really helpful. So just in terms of the recording, it really helps. Welcome to the full Nottinghamshire and City of Nottingham Fire and Rescue Authority meeting, Friday the 26th of February, just after 2 minutes after 10:30. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining today. We've got a fairly long agenda today, dealing with, amongst other things, the budget, which essentially is the way in which resources are allocated to support the fire service on behalf of the taxpayers of the city and county for the year ahead. But there are other items on the agenda that are important today. So it is a fairly long agenda, but hopefully we'll get through it fairly swiftly with colleagues' support. So item 1 in terms of the agenda is apologies for absence. I'm not aware of any apologies for absence having been notified. So just in terms of, for the record, for the public, we have got here today, in terms of members of the authority, councillors, myself, Councillor Michael Payne as chair, Councillor Toby Neal as vice chair, Councillor Andrew Brown, Councillor John Clark, Councillor Sybil Fielding, Councillor Stephen Garner, Councillor Vaughan Hopewell, Councillor Javed Khalil, Councillor Gul Nawaz Khan, Councillor John Longdon, Councillor Selma Mumtaz, Councillor Mike Quigley MBE, Councillor Shagufta Kadus, Councillor Nick Rain, Councillor Paris Simbiridis, Councillor Jonathan Wheeler, Councillor Jason Sadrosny and Councillor Sue Saddington. Also in attendance today, in accordance with the legislation, is Paddy Tippin, Nottinghamshire Police and Crime Commissioner, is most welcome for joining us. There are a number of officers on the call today supporting us at the authority, led by John Buckley, our Chief Fire Officer. John, do you just want to notify the members of the public or anybody listening who we've got in terms of supporting the authority, as well as obviously the clerk and those minuting the meeting today?
Yes, will do. Thank you very much, Chair. Myself, Chief Fire Officer, Clerk and Monitoring Officer Malcolm Townrow, Governance Officer Catherine Pryor today, and also officers in attendance are Craig Parkin, Deputy Chief Fire Officer, Candida Brudenell, Assistant Chief Fire Officer. We've got Area Manager Damien West on the call today, and also Area Manager Becky Smethers, who's Head of Finance and your Treasurer. Also in attendance, Alex Skennerton, who's our Media Support Officer, and Gavin Harris, Area Manager, Head of ICT, who is supporting us with the ICT process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. So the next item on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting held by the Fire Authority on the 27th of November 2020, and they're here for our confirmation. Anybody want to raise any issues in terms of either accuracy or comments or questions in relation to the minutes? If people do want to indicate, it would be helpful if you can use the raise hand function, but please do wave at me if that's not working on your system. I'm not seeing any indication of any questions or comments. So if I could just see a show of hands in terms of the minutes, if people are happy, just raise your hand. I'm not going to go around and take a reading on this non-contentious item. I'm seeing unanimous agreement. It's very helpful. Thank you very much. We also do need to obviously just make sure that we've dealt with declarations of interest. So are there any declarations of interest that anybody wants to raise at this stage? I'm not seeing any declarations of interest being raised. So we'll move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is Chair's announcements. Just a few things to deal with in terms of Chair's announcements today. There are obviously local elections for Nottinghamshire County Council taking place on the 6th of May, and indeed an election for the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner taking place at the same time on the 6th of May, having been delayed as a result of the COVID situation, a decision the government took last year. So those elections will be taking place concurrently on the 6th of May. I just wanted to wish good luck to all those who are standing, who have served on the authority, and just to say goodbye and a thank you to those who aren't. And in particular, just to pay my personal thanks and tribute and thanks on behalf of the entire authority and service to two individuals. First of all, to Andy Brown, Councillor Andrew Brown. Andrew has served on the Fire Authority since the annual general meeting in 2017 and has served a full 4 years with us. And Andrew's always acted in a very, very straightforward, professional, diligent manner on the authority. I certainly, Andy, have enjoyed a really close working relationship with you on the fire service, and I'm very, very grateful for the way in which you've worked very closely with me as chair and also Councillor Toby Neal as vice chair, but also the way in which you've worked hard to try and make sure that we can find consensus on issues before they come to Fire Authority. I'm really proud, and it's a credit to everybody on this authority, of the cross-party way in which we've dealt with issues on behalf of the communities we represent in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. And in no small part, Andy, that is down to the way you've put yourself forward and the way that you've led your group. Aside from the professional relationship, I really enjoyed the chats we've had as well, Andy, and the support that you've given. And I'm really sad to see that you're not standing for election again in the county council elections, and that therefore you won't be rejoining us after those elections at the Fire Authority. I certainly will really miss you, Andy, and I think the entire authority will miss you. I also think the county council will miss your sensible and calm voice. You've always spoken up on behalf of the residents. You've always taken your role very, very seriously, and you've always dealt with me in a very straightforward fashion, and I'm very grateful. So thank you, Andy, and I know there'll be a further opportunity for colleagues to thank you more formally, but I think I speak on behalf of the Chief Fire Officer as well in really paying tribute to the way in which you've worked with us. So thanks, Andy, and sorry that you're not restanding. I just also wanted to say a thank you to Parry Simbiridis, a member of my own group on the Fire Authority, who is also retiring from local politics. Anybody who knows Parry knows that he's absolutely not frightened to speak up for his values and his beliefs. He's a real character. His values and his beliefs are born out of personal experience of living through some difficult regimes back in his home country. And you know, since being here in the decades that he's been here, and the decades of public service he's given both on the county council and the time he's been on the Fire Authority, he's always very, very proudly stood up for his own values, for the most vulnerable people in society. He's a real character. He's passionate. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and he's been an absolutely brilliant member of the Fire Authority. Parry's also served since about July or August 2017. So he's been with us virtually for the full 4-year term, but he served a number of previous times on the Fire Authority as well, didn't you, Parry? And I know that he's struck up some really good close relationships with people who have worked for the fire service over those years. So sorry to see you won't be restanding, Parry. You'll be sorely missed at the county council, sorely missed in the Labour group at the county council, but more importantly, you'll be missed here at the Fire Authority. So a personal thank you to you for the support you provided, Parry, and for the excellent work you've done on the Fire Authority. I don't know whether Andy or Parry wanted to say anything at this point. Andy, and then I'll bring Parry in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for your very kind words. It's very surprising. Good things about things. I've enjoyed the last 4 years, and I hope, and I would like to thank my group as well. And I hope the input we've had has had positive results on the authority. I personally have seen a lot of changes with the collaboration across the last 4 years, not only with Derbyshire, but with the police as well. And may it continue. And thank you to everybody there. And I wish everybody good luck in the elections as well. And just hope the legacy that we've left continues. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Harry?
Thank you, Michael. Can you hear me?
Can hear you, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for your kind words. My Fire Authority was in my heart over the years since I became the first councillor in 2003, I believe, 28 years ago. I enjoy every minute I was on the Fire Authority. We've done a lot of work over the years by introducing different issues and measures as far as the authority is concerned, about women's recruit, about ethnic minorities, and I can go on. And I'm so proud I served for so long in the Fire Authority, and I will miss you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Parry, and thanks, Andy, as well. Just also, before I deal with a couple of other items, I want to put on record, I think it's important that we say this, it's not said enough. And I know I speak not only for the authority, but also for Paddy when I say this. A thank you to everybody in the fire service for the excellent work that you've been doing to support communities throughout the awful year and a bit we've now had in relation to COVID. There are something like 50 staff that are working outside of the
I
organisation.
lost it again, but
Whether that be in terms of vaccinations, whether that be in terms of driving ambulances, whether that be in terms of assisting tragically in terms of with our mortuaries that unfortunately have needed to be stood up, or assisting indeed right across the service, all of our staff with delivery of medication, of food parcels, of supporting in terms of getting clothing to the most vulnerable. And much more that the fire service has been doing. We're all incredibly proud of the work that you're doing. We're very grateful for the work that you're doing. Every single member of staff, every single member of the team in Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service really stepping up to the plate, and the communities in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire really appreciate it. And I know that effort has been matched by every single sector of our emergency services, and Paddy certainly will have seen that by our colleagues in the police as well, and indeed in the NHS and the ambulance service. And certainly the work that the fire service is now doing to help really roll out as swiftly as possible the vaccine is giving a glimmer of hope for people after a very difficult year and a bit. So thank you to from the bottom of our heart to everybody in the fire service for the work you're doing. It is very much appreciated. And thank you also to our trade union colleagues and representatives locally in Nottinghamshire. We enjoy a very good relationship with, are always straightforward in their dealings with us, and I know have been supportive on the ground of the work that's taking place here locally. We've got proud and good industrial relations in Nottinghamshire, and that's down to the relationships that have been built over many years. So thank you to our colleagues from the trade unions as well for the work they've been doing with us, and to John and his senior leadership team as well for the work they've been doing to maintain those strong relationships. I've got Councillor Shagufta Caduce, I think just wants to make a point on this particular issue.
I just wanted to add my thanks and my recognition for all the staff that have stepped up in so many ways during the crisis. And the reason we've had such a great response to the vaccination programme being rolled out is because people in all professions have stepped up and have been willing to jab people. And certainly, within the fire service, that's over 11,000 vaccinations that the staff have given to the people of Nottinghamshire, because they've been willing to step out of their day job to go and roll out the vaccination programme, and to play our part in that, to administered over 11,000 vaccinations. I just want to say I'm proud to be on the Fire Authority and proud to be part of an organisation that is willing to step up and play their part. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Shagufta. I've got an indication from Councillor Jonathan Wheeler, I think just wants to come in on this point as well. Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just on 2 quick points. First of all, again, to add my thanks to all our wonderful team who are supporting the community. I've seen in my own division of West Bridgeshire South what the team from West Bridgeshire Fire Station are doing, and of course across Rushcliffe as well. So I really want to put that on record. And also, again, to thank both Andy and Parry for their service. I mean, especially Andy, who obviously I've worked close with, as all my group have, the work that Andy's put in, and I've seen go above and beyond in terms of his role. And again, thanks to yourself as well, Chairman, for the way you've worked with ourselves as well. But like I say, I think I'll speak from my whole group, where we've got our thanks on record for Andy for his work, and wish him all the best in his, I say retirement, but he'll find something to keep himself going, no doubt, and yeah, get the fishing rod out, no doubt. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Councillor Sue Saddington.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to echo those thoughts, both to Parry and to Andy. I came on the Fire Authority only 2 years ago, so I'm very much a new girl. But I have to say, everybody works well together, and particularly the crew and the Fire Authority who have gone out just recently during this awful pandemic that we're still actually in. And so my thanks to all of them, my thanks to Parry, and my thanks most of course to Andy. So thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Anybody else like to say anything else on that particular item? I'm not seeing any other indications. So just a few final points in terms of Chair's announcements. People will have obviously seen the COVID-19 roadmap was set out by the, sorry, it's Councillor Neil.
Yeah, sorry, I can see Councillor Hopewell waving quite vigorously.
Apologies, Vaughan, it's just not showing on my screen.
Sybil is as well.
Sorry, Vaughan, it's because it's spread over to your screen. Sorry, go on, Vaughan, and then I'll bring Sybil in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I wish to echo the thoughts of other people regarding the pandemic that we're going through at the moment, and the fact that, you know, our firefighters are not just doing the normal job and the normal roles of cutting people out cars and visiting floods, etc., that they're helping the community. And the Mansfield people have gone above and beyond. And I'd like to thank the Mansfield Fire Station for all the help that they've given me and other people in Mansfield over the last 4 years of me being on this authority. And I'd like to thank Parry and Andy Brown for their help and guidance that they've brought to this authority, and wish them both all the best in their retirement.
Thank you, Vaughan. Sybil?
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to add my thanks to...
Sybil, we're not quite picking you up, Sybil. It's your volume's just very low.
Sorry about that. I want to echo thanks to... we are still having difficulty with my volume.
It's not brilliant, Sybil. We can hear you clearly, but it's just very low in terms of volume.
Thanks to both Parry and to Andy for their service to the fire authority, but I also want to add my thanks to the work that's been done in Bassetlaw by the service over the pandemic. Not only setting up testing stations and the befriending and the myriad of work that's been done has been truly amazing, and I absolutely appreciate all that's been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Sybil. And I think you will, colleagues will hear a little bit more from the Chief Fire Officer later about the excellent work that's been happening by the entire team. So the final 2 points on Chair's announcements in relation to the COVID-19 roadmap, which we've seen obviously has been set out by the Prime Minister. The Chief Fire Officer and his team are considering the implications of the government's 4-stage roadmap regarding COVID. This will be considered as the service continues to support staff and communities throughout the pandemic. Part of the work will involve group leaders and the clerk of the Fire Authority to determine the most appropriate way of conducting Fire Authority meetings, which will also depend on government extending the flexibility to continue with virtual meetings. Members will be kept informed of this, and rest assured that representations are being made to the government about the need to extend the legislation in terms of allowing virtual meetings. So let's see where that situation gets to. Just finally, in relation to the Police and Crime Commissioner review, which colleagues will be aware of, the white paper, we were expecting this to be published, and as yet it hasn't been, as far as I'm aware, unless it's happened this morning while we're in the meeting. But I think, speaking to Police and Crime Commissioner Tippin, that we are expecting it, I think, soon. But who knows at the moment? The government have got all sorts of things that they are dealing with. As I say, there was an expectation that the government were about to publish a white paper following the review which has been undertaken in terms of the role of police and crime commissioners. We do understand there will be a particular reference to fire and rescue authorities and services, and once this is available, the Chief will give a report to members to consider on this particular issue, because it may or may not have implications in terms of governance. But I mean, I think from my perspective, I will bring Paddy on this item. We've got a really strong relationship with colleagues in the police. We've got a strong relationship with Paddy as Police and Crime Commissioner. We hope that will continue. There's good collaboration work happening, and I think we're proof here in Nottinghamshire that you don't need to rearrange the deck chairs to be doing really good work between two organisations closely. And I think that's no better highlighted than the excellent work that's going on in relation to the building of the joint headquarters. But there's much more in terms of collaboration that's happening. So I think we've got a good story to tell here in Nottinghamshire, and we should be proud of it. And thanks to Paddy and his colleagues in the police and the Chief Constable for the close working that happens. Paddy, did you want to come in on this item?
Just very briefly, Michael, to say the publication is long delayed. It should have been published about a fortnight ago. It was scheduled for publication yesterday, but because of the big COVID announcements, it lost its spot. It's now being earmarked for next Thursday, but of course we've got the budget on the 3rd of March, so we may lose the slot again. But the Home Secretary is determined to bring the review forward as quickly as possible. It will result in a white paper, which is going to be entitled Fire Service Reform. It's not just about governance issues. The white paper will be out for consultation. There'll be a need probably for some primary legislation. So whatever the white paper talks about, it will be at least 12 to 24 months before anything comes forward. And just to reinforce the point that you've made and other people have made, we're doing extremely well here in Nottinghamshire in terms of police fire cooperation, and we've demonstrated we can do it without the need for governance change. So I'm grateful for all the support that John and his colleagues have given over the past 18 months. We need to move forward together.
Thank you, Paddy. That's very, very, very helpful indeed. And just finally, in relation to Chair's announcements, the Strategic Inclusion Board will take place at the rising of the meeting today. So any members who are members of the Strategic Inclusion Board, please do stay on at the end of the meeting when we've finished. Okay, we'll move on to the substantive items on the agenda now. So agenda item 5 is the Prudential Code for Capital Finance 2021-22, and this is to be introduced by Becky Smothers, our Head of Finance. Becky.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to consider the affordability of the capital programme, which forms part of the budget report later on the agenda. So when we undertake capital expenditure, it's usually funded by borrowing, and it's just this report is to ensure that that borrowing is sustainable going forward and doesn't place an undue liability on future taxpayers. So I'm not going to go through it in great depth, but I will just concentrate on the more pertinent points in the report. So in section 2.1, their first indicator relates to the ratio of financing costs to the revenue stream. So if you look on the bottom row of that table on page 15, the ratio increases from 5% back in 1920 up to 6.9%. We do have a maximum level set for the authority of 8%, and it does actually we have a 10-year capital plan that was approved in the medium-term financial strategy, and it does creep up towards that level towards the end. And then in 2.8 on page 17, it demonstrates in another way the capital financing requirement does increase to reflect that higher level of borrowing. And I just wanted to give some assurance to members that is something that we are watching very carefully in the finance team and with our Treasury Management consultants. I think once we have the new strategic plan, the IRMP, gets approved next year, and we have the new fire cover review as well, it will give us the opportunity to review the capital programme going forward regarding what we actually need, and have a further look at a couple of these indicators. And really that demonstrates the purpose of these indicators in highlighting areas of concern going forward, not just for this year or next year, but 10 years hence. So other than that, I think the other change slightly from previous years in 2.14 is that we have had a slight increase in the authorised limit, which is the maximum amount that we're permitted to borrow without gaining further fire authority approval. And if you remember back, I think it was in May of 2020, we asked for an increase in this indicator because of the uncertainty due to COVID of the financial markets, just in case we needed to borrow additional money because of cash flow purposes. So we've just extended that and built a little bit in extra to give us a little comfort in the authorised limit for next year. So other than that, if anybody's got any questions that they'd like to raise, I'm more than happy to answer them. or if anybody wants to come forward and ask more questions outside of the meeting or have some training on this area, I'm always open to offers.
If I could just interject, Michael's messaged me. Unfortunately, his internet's just dropped out, so he's lost the meeting. So, Councillor Neil, could I ask you to pick up the chair while he's trying to get back in, please?
Sorry, I'm having some problems here. Did someone just ask me a question?
Yeah, sorry, Toby. Michael's messaged me. His internet's just dropped out, and he's dropped out the meeting. He is trying to regain.
Yeah, no problem.
If I could just pass to you, Vice Chair.
Of course, yeah. So I'm having some droppings in and out as well at the moment, so we might be working down the list. Okay, Becky, sorry, you want to? You were asking.
No, I'm saying if anybody's got any questions, I can always fill in and give you more detail.
No, we're good. I'm not seeing any hands up at the moment. No. Okay, thanks, Becky. No indication anybody wants to ask any questions, so we'll move on to the next item, which I'm assuming you're doing as well, Treasury Management.
Yes, do we need to approve?
Sorry, yeah, is there some recommendations?
Recommendations, yeah, it's just to approve the prudential limits on page 24. Yeah. So those are the limits that are set out for the future year.
Okay, yeah. Okay, can I have a show of hands from everybody to approve? Yeah, that looks unanimous. Yeah, thank you. Becky, do you want to take us on to Treasury Management?
Yeah, I can. So let me just get myself sorted out for this one. So the Treasury Management strategy is important because it sets out a framework within which in my team, the finance team, can operate. It sets out limits that we can't exceed, and it maintains proper governance of the Treasury Management activity. It's linked to the Prudential Code, which we've just looked at, which considers how much we can borrow and how the borrowing should be structured to minimise risks. But this goes on further to look at borrowing, the timing of the borrowing and where we borrow from, and also looks at how we manage our cash and probably most important, the investment strategy, because that's where the highest risk for the authority when we invest our cash, our reserves externally. So the key points in the report to note are how we manage the security of our funds and how we ensure the liquidity of our funds. So we can make sure we've got sufficient funds available to pay our staff, for example, which is our biggest expense. The importance of this was demonstrated, as I mentioned earlier, at the beginning, at the early part of COVID-19 in the first lockdown, when there was a race for cash and we had to undertake borrowing advance of the capital programme. In reality, it didn't materialise to anything, but it just shows that we need to be keeping our eye on the ball and making sure that we've got those funds available when we need them. The security of funds is ensured using the creditworthiness service, but that will get provided by our Treasury advisors, Link Asset Management, and they can continually monitor all the counterparties, those are the banks and institutions that we deal with, and alert us to any changes on a daily basis, or even more frequently than that if necessary. The higher the considered creditworthiness, then the longer the service will be able to invest with that counterparty. Currently, all our investments are held less than 1 year due to the low interest rates. We are recommending a 2 million limit on over 1 year investments, which is the same as in previous years. There are no major significant changes to the Treasury Management strategy. So it covers the economic background, those creditworthiness and borrowing strategies as we've discussed in the Prudential Code. So again, if anybody's got any particular questions that they'd like to ask, I'm more than happy to take them.
Michael's back in the meeting, so I'll hand sharing back to him.
Thanks, Toby, and apologies to colleagues. I was cut off by the internet and then had to restart computer, the joys of technology. I take it we're on the Treasury Management Strategy, item 6. So any comments or questions for Becky in terms of the Treasury Management strategy? Shagufta, I'm seeing a hand by Shagufta. Is that a legacy hand? Yeah.
Yes. No, it's not a legacy hand. Becky, and my apologies if this is a lay question because I'm not a finance person, but in section 2.26, where you talk about is it the Public Loans Board loan?
Yes.
So previously, that was £3 million in 2023 to 2024.
Yeah.
And you're forecasting that there's going to be a total new borrowing of 11.5 million. And I just was kind of a bit, when I was briefly reading the report, surprised that you'd gone from 3 million loan to up to 11.5 million. And I just wondered if you could clarify that for me.
Yes, certainly. It's not, our total borrowing isn't £3 million. It's substantially more than that.
Yeah,
but the 3 million, what we normally would do in funding the capital programme is we borrow usually from the PWLB, but not always. And then the money that we would, instead of saving up to repay like you would when you repay, for example, your mortgage, we would normally put some aside each year to repay at the end of the loan. What we do is reinvest the money that we would save into the capital programme, and then we would re-borrow that £3 million at the end. So it's the same effect. So we have a loan that's expiring in next financial year, and we need to replace that because we've reinvested the money that we saved up in the capital programme to save us borrowing at that time. And then we've got further borrowing to fund the capital programme during next year, and that's where the £11.5 million comes from.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for Becky? No, I'm not seeing any. So we are asked to members to approve the Treasury Management strategy for 2021-22, and that members approve the minimum revenue provision policy for 2021-22. I am just going to do a readout of names and ask for against, or abstention. So myself, Councillor Michael Payne, for. Councillor Toby Neal.
For.
Councillor Andrew Brown.
For.
Councillor John Clark.
For.
Councillor Sybil Fielding.
For.
Councillor Stephen Garner.
For.
Councillor Vaughan Hopewell.
For.
Councillor Javed Khalil.
For.
Councillor Gulnawaz Khan.
For.
Councillor John Longden.
For.
Councillor Salma Mumtaz.
For.
Councillor Mike Quigley.
For.
Councillor Shagufta Kudus.
For.
Councillor Nick Rain.
For.
Councillor Parry Simbiridis. Councillor Parry Simbiridis. Parry, can you hear me? Just give me a thumbs up, Parry, if you're in favour, or a thumbs. That's it. I can see that's fine. Voting in favour. Councillor Jonathan Wheeler.
For.
Councillor Jason Zadrozny.
For.
Thanks, Jason. And finally, Councillor Sue Saddington. You there, Sue? Councillor Saddington. I can't see or hear you, Sue. Just indicate to me whether you're voting in favour.
I'm here and I'm voting in favour. My mute had got stuck and my video had got stuck.
Fine, Sue, I can hear you. Thank you.
I'm here.
Thank you. Okay, that's unanimous. So thank you, everybody, for that. We've now got item 7 on the agenda, which is the final accounts. We are then going to take the external auditors as item 8 and then deal with the budget proposals as item 9. So final accounts, Becky.
Thank you. So again, this report goes hand in hand with the auditor's report that we're gonna consider next. So let me just sort myself out. So Members will be familiar with the final accounts because they did come to Fire Authority in November in their unaudited form. There's been a couple of minor changes as a result of the audit. You'll see in section 2.2 of the cover report, there was a slight change, so it's only £15,000. It's not significant, but to the 1920 capital outturn position that was reported back to Policy and Strategy Committee back on the 24th of July 2020. So I've just put the revised capital outturn position there in the cover report for your convenience. There's been a couple of other changes which are identified in the audit differences in the audit report coming along next. Most of those do relate to the notes in the accounts. There was one that does affect the balance sheet and the cash flow, and that's 129,000 payment that was included in both debtors and creditors figure. It was a correction of an automated. So I think I'm getting some feedback there. It was a system generated payment which needed taken out, but it was corrected and put into debtors instead. So we needed to take out altogether. So it has a net effect on the bottom line of 0, but as I said earlier, it does affect the figures in there, in the creditor figures in the balance sheet and in the cash flow. So the purpose of the audit is to highlight the errors in the system, and that just goes to show the thoroughness of the audit that we have had, because it has identified some areas that did need correcting. So the statement of accounts are attached in the appendix to the report. I will go through them page by page if you'd like to, or I could alternatively just take questions.
Are there any comments or questions that people want to raise in relation to the final accounts for 2019-2020 for Becky? If people can either raise their hand using the raised hand button or indicate. I've got Councillor Nick Rain and then Councillor Gulnawaz Khan. Sue, did I see you indicating as well to come in?
Thanks, Michael. I just wanted to.
Okay, Nick and then Gul.
It's my mute button I'm having trouble with.
Okay, Nick.
Thanks, Michael. I just wanted to say briefly to thank Becky. I know we've had a number of thanks for the work she's done and the thorough and professional way she's done. It's been absolutely outstanding, often in difficult circumstances. So I thought we'd just say, thank you very much. It's very, very thorough.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Gul?
Thank you, Chair. Becky is on the booklet, page 76, bottom paragraph. Have you got an appropriate site for replacement of workshop fire station now, or still waiting for it?
No, I think the site's now been identified. I think, John, would you like to come in on that point?
Yes, I can come in on that. We have currently got planning permission submitted in with Bassett Law for a new site that we've identified. Councillor Feeling will probably tell you the name. Is it the Vesuvius site?
Vesuvius site, yeah.
Vesuvius site, yeah. So yeah, plans are in there. As and when we've got all that approved, it will be reported back through Finances and Resources Committee to give members a full update on what we're proposing to do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gul. Any other comments or questions for Becky on the final accounts? No, unless you want to say anything else, Becky, then we'll move to a vote on the recommendation, which is that members approve the audited statement accounts 2019-20 as attached to Appendix A. So I will have, again, a read through the names for, against or abstention. Myself, Councillor Michael Payne, for. Councillor Toby Neal? For. Councillor Andrew Brown?
For.
Councillor John Clark?
For.
Councillor Sybil Fielding?
For.
Councillor Stephen Garner? Councillor Garner? I'll come back to Councillor Garner. Councillor Hopewell?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Javed Khalil?
For.
Councillor Gulnawaz Khan.
4.
Thank you, Gul. Councillor John Longden.
4.
Councillor Selma Mumtaz.
4.
Councillor Mike Quigley.
4.
Councillor Shagufta Kadus.
4.
Councillor Nick Rain.
4.
Councillor Parry Simbiridis. I can see voting for Parry, yeah. Councillor Jonathan Wheeler.
4.
Councillor Jason Zadrozny.
4.
And Councillor Sue Saddington.
4.
Thank you, Sue. Councillor Stephen Garner, are you voting for, against, or abstention? Are you there? Are you there, Stephen? I'm not getting Councillor Garner, so we will move on. It's unanimous of those who are voting. If Stephen does appear later and wants to indicate his vote, I'm sure we can make sure that that is appropriately recorded in the minutes. Okay, the next item is the external auditor's report to those charged with governance 2019-2020, and I think Becky's going to introduce this item, and we are also joined by Helen Henshaw from Ernst & Young. Welcome to the meeting, Helen, and thanks for joining us and giving your time today, and indeed the time that's been given by your team for the audit. I'll hand over to Becky to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this does relate obviously to the statement of accounts that have now been audited. Helen and her team have been on site for some time now and undertaken a thorough audit. There are some areas of audit differences, and some of those we've changed the accounts for, as previously reported, and some of those we haven't because they're immaterial or just for note. So I will hand over to, I won't want to steal any of Helen's thunder. I'll hand over to Helen to go through her report with you. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks, Becky. I suppose before I begin, I just wanted to say and acknowledge, Becky has done a great job and runs a very small team at Notts Fire, particularly when you count them up in terms of full-time equivalents. And you've seen the size of the accounts, which thankfully Becky didn't go through on a page-by-page review, but you can see how large and complicated these documents are. So I think all credit to the team for working with us to get the audit to the point that it's at. So I'll just step you through the report that we've put into your pack today. I'm going to use the page numbers in my report as opposed to the pack page numbers, if that's okay with you, because it just scrolls quicker on my screen. If I take us through to page 5, first of all, in the executive summary, page 5 just sets out some of the changes that have had to happen this year as a result of COVID-19. I mean, strangely, in the circumstances this year, it's actually not that long ago that I presented our audit plan to you, despite the fact that the audit plan per se was prepared many, many months ago before we went into lockdown and figured out how to work Zoom and virtual meetings, etc. But in terms of the audit, COVID-19 has obviously had an impact because it impacts particular susceptibility to risk of numbers going into the financial statements, and risk around whether the disclosures in the financial statements are appropriate given the circumstances. And that's really what's being talked to on page 5 of the report. So, for example, more work has had to be put in this year to look at the valuation of the property, plant and equipment, and whether the market impacts of COVID-19 have impacted those valuations at all, and whether the numbers that are appearing in the financial statements are fair at the end of March. In respect of going concern, whilst none of us expect, the government to pull the plug on the fire service, given all the commentary we've had earlier on in the meeting about the good work the fire service has done, that's not to say that Becky in her role as treasurer and me in my role of external auditor can disregard the fact that in order to keep going, there has to be cash in the bank to pay the liabilities, and there has to be sufficient reserves to keep the organisation operational for 12 months from the date the accounts are signed, so that ticking clock doesn't start at the end of the financial year. It actually starts at the date the accounts are signed, so effectively 12 months from now. So that has required additional consideration and work this year. If I move us on to page 6, so just so that you've got the context for the information I'm going to give you in the rest of the report, we assess a materiality level, as I talked you through when I presented the plan, which is effectively the level at which start to determine which can be. Materiality was set at 1.34 million, and we reduced that to 50% of that figure in terms of our targeted testing on account balances. The reason we go to 50%, or we have gone to 50% this year, if you recall, is there were quite a number of audit adjustments made in the previous financial year or identified in the previous financial year, which give us an anticipation that errors might be found, and therefore our testing becomes more detailed to avoid the risk that undetected misstatements would exist in the financial statements. And anything over 67,000, then we will report back to yourselves. We did change those assessments ever so slightly as a result of the draft accounts, but not really significantly. And we did consider whether, in light of COVID, any changes were required, and we determined that given COVID impacted so late in the financial year for 1920, then no change would be necessary. So we've stuck broadly with those figures. Obviously, ordinarily, when you perform an audit, you are stood next to the individual which you are seeking audit evidence from. You're able to have face-to-face conversations, see documentation, etc. Everybody working remotely, trying to screen share. Sorry, I've just got a message come up telling me my internet connection is not happy.
We just lost you. We just lost you very sentence.
Am I back now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Helen. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So we've overcome the remoteness by making best use of the technology, and Becky and the team have been very helpful in enabling scanned documents, etc. So we're not having any concerns about being able to get the evidence over to us to support the audit. Now, if I just scan us onto page 7, at the time of writing this report, there were a number of areas where we were just finishing up wrapping up the work. I'll just quickly go through those now to give you an update. So the report reads: completion of work in the following areas of accounts was outstanding. So the expenditure and funding analysis, that work has now been concluded. We made some recommendations to management about our views on the content and placing of that particular note in the financial statements, but management have chosen not to adjust that, and it's not impacting the audit opinion. The reserves work was concluded and no issues were noted. Property, plant and equipment valuations I'm going to come on to in a moment because there's more detail in the report on that. The payroll work has finished with no issues noted other than the control recommendation that was already included within this report. And similarly, the financial instruments and journal entry testing is now concluded with no issues to report to the authority. The final version of the financial statements that you've got in the pack before you, we have reviewed, and it's going through our final check-in procedures just due to the timing of when that was received and availability of the finance team to answer some of our questions. And receipt of the signed management representation letter is the very last thing that happens before we issue our opinion. Similarly, completion of subsequent events review is a very last item before an opinion is issued. In terms of the requirements for the national and a great deal of work we have to do there, and I'll do that as soon as my audit opinion is issued. As Becky mentioned, at the bottom of page 7 there have been some audit differences identified during the course of our audit procedures, as you would expect.
We have lost you, Helen, I think. Can anybody else hear Helen, or is it just...
No, she's frozen, unfortunately. Looks like her internet's failed her.
She's got the same bug that my computer was having this morning.
Yeah.
God bless her.
Stopped mid-flow as well.
Becky, is there anything else you want to add to the report itself? While we just give Helen a minute to see whether she can get back into the meeting.
I suppose the key points for councillors probably to be most aware of are on page 24 and 25 of Helen's report, which are the differences between their findings that they've had and those that we have adjusted for and those that haven't. The EFA report, which I can't even remember, the external, it goes alongside the income and expenditure report, and we deliberately put it next to that because it does relate to the outturn report that you see. So even though technically it is permitted by SIPFA to be put there, the auditors are not very keen. It's the expenditure and funding analysis, and it's on page 114 of your pack. So we put that there on purpose to give you more information that's understandable and link it, because otherwise the statement does become a bit of a beast and is very hard to follow for most people.
Becky,
yeah?
sorry to interrupt you. Helen is back now.
Yeah, Helen is back with us.
I'm so sorry. I don't know when you lost me.
Flow, I'm afraid, Helen.
You were just dealing with the audit differences, Helen, and we just lost you about halfway through you dealing with the audit differences that Becky had referred to.
Okay. I think I was just trying to say in audit differences that I will go through those in more detail when we get to that particular section of the report. But as Becky alluded to, there were a number of differences identified, some of which management have adjusted, some of which they haven't. The reason for the ones that haven't been adjusted is effectively because management and ourselves agree that they wouldn't be material and wouldn't have an impact on the user of the financial statements were they to remain unadjusted. I was then going to move us on in the interest of time to page 12 of our report, which starts to talk through in a little bit more detail the risks that were identified in our audit plan and feedback to you the results of our work in those particular areas. So if your memory serves you, these will be very familiar to you. So one of the significant risks that we raise on every audit is the misstatement due to fraud and error, which is effectively management override of controls. We've performed our testing in respect of looking for evidence of management override of controls, whether that be making inappropriate judgments, being too aggressive in estimates that are made within the financial statements, and looking at a full population of journals and identifying particular indicators that might lead one to believe there was some sort of management override going on. We've not found anything as a result of those procedures to indicate there's any instances of fraud or error resulting from management override of controls. If I move us then on to page 13, the other significant risk, which again is applicable to every organisation, not just Nottinghamshire Fire, is the risk that either revenue or expenditure is recognised inappropriately to artificially manipulate, for want of a better phrase, the outturn of the organisation for any given year. We particularly focused on whether expenditure had been capitalised inappropriately, as that is a relatively straightforward and arguably common way of deferring expenditure to future periods to make the current year outcome look better. We've performed testing around the items that were capitalised in the year and hadn't found any instances of those being inappropriately capitalised. As Becky mentioned earlier, however, we did test expenditure regarding transport related expenditure, and we did identify one item where there was expenditure accrued at the year end for a liability which never materialised. So it was recorded in the books in the wrong, well, it shouldn't have been recorded at all, but it was recorded in the wrong period, which is what this risk is sort of looking at. Because we had identified that particular item in a representative sample, we've then effectively used mathematics to extrapolate that across the entire population, which gives an overstatement of expenditure of just over £1 million. Now, as I say, that's a very mathematical exercise, and given the level of 1 million is below materiality, management have taken the decision not to adjust the accounts for that, and I would agree that's a sensible decision to make. We also identified the valuation of the firefighters' pension scheme as a significant risk due to the size of the liability attaching to that scheme, and also the degree of estimation uncertainty and subjectivity within the actuarial calculations that are performed in order to get to the figure which sits in the balance sheet of the authority. We have performed a range of procedures around both the inputs that the actuary uses in its calculations, and also considering the assumptions made by the actuary informing their opinion, which informs the numbers that go into the NOTS fire accounts. And we're comfortable that the liability is fairly stated at the balance sheet date. If I take us on to page 16, the valuation of land and buildings, you may recall from above, this was an area which was outstanding at the time that the report was written. Now, the authority employs its own valuer to, oh, I think I've gone again.
We can still hear you, Helen.
Still there,
Still hear
Helen.
me?
Don't worry, you're still there.
Okay. Sorry, I keep getting messages telling me that the internet's not happy, so apologies. So yes, the authority engages its own specialist valuer to value selection of the life cycle. We have used our own internal real estate specialists to perform a review of a sample of those assets and understand the valuation inputs and the assumptions used by the valuer to determine those amounts that go into the financial statements, and we're happy that there is no material misstatement in that population. For the rest of the assets which are not revalued in year, this year the authority have taken our advice from last year's audit, and they have performed a review of whether the assets that haven't been formally revalued in the year have actually suffered a valuation movement since their last formal point of valuation, and whether that needs to be reflected in the financial statements. At the time of writing this report, we were still working through with management exactly what uplifts had been made or what movements had been made to which assets and why, and sense checking that against other market available data in terms of the way the assets had moved. And at that point in time, it was looking like there was a potential understatement of 1.2 million of the assets, as we've noted in the report. However, a few weeks have passed since the writing of this report, and we've worked together with our real estate experts and with management to understand exactly where the points of movement in the asset base is, and I'm now comfortable that actually the difference is more likely to be around £80,000 rather than £1.2 million when we get rid of some anomalies that I don't think are appropriate across the whole portfolio population. So that figure has come down quite substantially as a result of that work. There is one small piece of work outstanding which the team will be concluding on today, which is effectively to assure ourselves that in posting those revaluation differences, they have been appropriately, this is going to get a bit technical and I apologise, this is local government accounting for you, but when a revaluation occurs, it can either be booked to a reserve or it can be taken through the comprehensive income and expenditure statement affecting the outturn for the year. And there are rules attaching to when you post it to the reserve and when you post it to the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. You will recall from last year that the asset system that's used at the authority in many respects is not particularly user friendly, and it's quite difficult to get information out of it for the finance team and for ourselves. And we're just working through that final element to make sure that there are no issues there. There was a small issue in that area last year, but it was not adjusted for, and it was very small in size. If I then move us on to page 17, the other area that we look at in a bit more detail in the accounts, but doesn't significant risk, is the pension liability with respect to the local government pension scheme. And this is the individuals that are part of the Nottinghamshire pension fund, of which the Fire Authority is an admitted body. We have, as is the protocol in local authorities, we have written to the auditors of Nottinghamshire Pension Fund, and although they were delayed, they did provide us with assurances over the balances within the Fire Authority's accounts, and there were some anomalies within their reporting to us that we had to work through. But given the relatively small size of the Fire Authority relative to the scale of the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund, we were able to conclude that those matters wouldn't be material in the Fire Authority itself. Page 18, going concern, we've talked about briefly already. Becky and I have worked together to enhance the level of disclosure with respect to going concern in the final version of the financial statements compared to what was in the original draft, and that now covers the consideration of the liquidity of the authority and also its reserves position over the 12-month period from effectively the end of February. Page 3, section 3 of the report sets out the draft audit opinion. I'm not going to go through that in a great deal of detail, other than to say to you that the audit opinion will be unqualified in respect to the financial statements, and there will be no matters to report in respect of the value for money conclusion, which we will come to later. So it's a clean audit report is the term that people would usually use with respect to that. Section 4 of the report goes into more detail in terms of audit differences, and we've reported those of most interest here, that those differences which have been adjusted in the accounts, which are just more presentational or typographical, if you like, obviously haven't been listed here because I don't think you'd be particularly interested in them. For the most part, as Becky already said in her introduction to the financial statements, these have impacted the disclosure notes more so than the main financial statements themselves, which is not uncommon given that the notes take up the vast majority of the weight of the paper in a set of financial statements. And I think you'll have read through those, and they're all quite self-explanatory in terms of how they've arisen and what the impact is. In terms of the unadjusted differences, which are presented on page 25, you will see there that there's a reference to what we thought at the time was potentially a £1.2 million error in the valuation of property, plant and equipment, which we've managed to scale back quite considerably. The depreciation figure actually was identified in the previous year, and is effectively what you're seeing here is a roll forward into the current year. So last year were not depreciated and the current year, which is quite right. So the cumulative position would be obviously because it's doubled. We've also identified during our testing just short of £130,000 worth of assets which are sitting within the fixed asset register, but actually these assets are around software and other items such as that, which actually are no longer in use by the authority, and they therefore should be removed from the statement of account. They're not being used anymore. And we already talked about the £1 million expenditure item, which both management and I, based on the fact that it was a sampled item, which we then mathematically extrapolated, consider it would be appropriate to leave unadjusted. I'll then quickly take us money, which is the other element of the conclusion that sits within our audit opinion alongside the account. Was a number of value for money risks identified in our plan, and we've worked through to see the supporting evidence of whether proper arrangements are in place at the authority to mitigate these risks. The first one is with respect to securing financial resilience, and Notts Fire is by no means alone in having this as a significant risk to their value for money conclusion. We've worked through in a great deal of detail the information that management put together in terms of building up its medium-term financial plan, the assumptions within it, and the measurement of outturn against that, and ensuring that reserves in future years are protected, etc. We don't pose qualifying value for money conclusion with respect to financial resilience. However, in common with other authorities, it would be remiss of me to say that the authority obviously needs to be vigilant in taking action to avoid any overspends, and recognising that the continued use of reserves to support the budget is not sustainable, and will lead to issues going forward if that can't be avoided. The second value for money risk that was identified was the establishment of the joint headquarters. And this was about the arrangements to make informed decisions around that particular project, and making sure that the governance around those decisions was sufficiently robust. We've spent considerable time looking through the documentation that management have provided around the way that decision-making process has unfolded, the guidance that's been sought by various parties, and the relevant people and committees have been involved at the appropriate points in order to ensure that good governance has been followed, and as a result, again, we're happy with the arrangement and will remain silent on that in our value for money conclusion. And then the third and final risk was with regards to the HMIC findings of 2019, and effectively ensuring that those are being followed up appropriately and given the due respect that they need within the authority in order to make sure that they are closed out appropriately and also in a timely fashion. And again, our review of the work that's been done has not highlighted anything that I feel is sufficient for us to need to qualify our value for money conclusion at all. If I then just briefly on page 34, in addition to looking at the financial statements and forming a value for money conclusion, we are required to review for consistency with our knowledge of the authority, but also with information published alongside of it, all of the narrative reporting that sits in the financial accounts document. So that's effectively the annual governance statement, the narrative statement, and we have done that. And after there's been a small amount of changes that the authority have made as a result, but as a consequence, we're able to conclude that we are happy from a consistency perspective, that there were no issues there. And then I'm conscious of time, and I realise this is a big report, so bear with me. Section 7 of the report, which is our assessment of the control environment, starts on page 37. Now, it's fair to say our audit approach at the Fire Authority doesn't rely on the operation of internal controls. We don't take a controls reliance approach. We perform a fully substantive audit. That means that we test transactions on a statistical basis across the whole of the financial statements. That being said, we do observe the control environment in operation, and therefore when we do see something worthy of note, then we will bring that out to management, and that's what this section of the report is doing. So the areas that we just want to bring to your attention here on quality control finance, this is a point that effectively rolled forward from this, and it's in some way reflective of the fact that, and the point that I made earlier, that's a very small finance team at Nottinghamshire Fire, very small, and that does limit the extent to which good quality control and working audit can be achieved. And I think the impact really in terms of the audit is that the audit takes longer to form, the less quality control is business working papers before they get to audit. I think a lot of that though is a function of the size, to be honest. related to that point is making sure that the disclosure notes are consistent across the financial statements, and this is just reflecting the number of small administrative changes that need to occur in the financial statements that are presented for audit before we get to a final position. Noticed, you will recall I said that actually in terms of valuation of the property, plant and equipment, management have taken a very positive step forward this year, I think, in terms of looking at the assets that aren't formally revalued in year and taking a view on where valuations have changed. However, the examination whether there might be any indications of impairment within the asset base, you know, so has there been any particular matters that mean that are not longer operational or may need a significant amount of maintenance or had some other issue around it? Process is particularly light in our and could benefit from in enhanced, or if assets needed, then that's done on a timely basis, and for that asset to happen to be picked for the roll-in cycle, which could be 4 or 5 years hence. The following page, page 38, continuing on the same vein, lender option, borrower option, LOBO debt. This is a point that's carried forward from the previous year. There's £8 of debt in respect of lender option, borrower option loans. The authority doesn't have formal documentation with regards to those loans, and it would be best practice to obtain that from the lender. New this year, we did notice when we were performing our work on payroll, which was part of the reason why at the drafting of this report, the payroll work was shown as outstanding. There was a number of discrepancies that were identified between the payroll system and the financial account system that feeds the financial statements you've been reviewing today. That obviously causes a problem in terms of knowing which one is right. Our suggestion is that monthly reconciliations between these two systems would effectively prevent getting to a position where at the end of the year there are unexplained differences between the payroll system and the financial accounting system. I'm going to just quickly run us past a lot of the other information in here, which is really just for information purposes for you, and just point out that in Appendix A, we've set out the required communications with what's termed an audit committee, which is what is typically referred to as those charged with governance, if you like. As you can see here, there are lots of communications that are required by the external auditor to those charged with governance, which at Notts Fire is yourselves as the fire authority. This sets out that I believe that we have adhered to all of those responsibilities in the reporting that I'm giving you today and the plan that was presented earlier. However, if anybody in the committee feels that there are matters that we should or could communicate in addition to this, then please do let me know that. And at that point, Chair, I'll probably stop and just invite questions.
Thank you, Helen, for that comprehensive report. Very much appreciated, and thank you for the work of the team working alongside Becky. I think I just want to echo that in spite of being a very small team, Becky and her team do an absolutely outstanding job. And actually overall, I think what stands out, having read this report in depth, as I know other members will have done, is that it's an outstanding report. Yes, there are some small audit differences. Yes, there are some small issues that have been flagged, but nothing majorly untoward. And I think ultimately, as you said, Helen, an unqualified audit, an unqualified value for money conclusion as well. So Becky, I think you should be very proud of the work you do with a very, very small team and a very small resource. And certainly I know I speak on behalf of the entire authority when I say that. I will throw it open to comments and questions. Thank you, Helen, for coming today. I'll reiterate what I said at the Finance Committee, which is I still do remain very disappointed about the delay, irrespective of the issues in relation to COVID, in the audit report finding its way here. It obviously should have been with us at the latter part of last year. We did actually move a fire authority forward for that purpose to November, and it's disappointing that there is a delay. And the other thing I'm afraid to say, in spite and notwithstanding the commentary that I have read in detail in the report, incredibly disappointed on behalf of taxpayers that the fee is almost 3 times higher than that which was set out by Ernst & Young when first contracting for the audit. I will bring in other members of the authority who I know may want to ask particular detailed questions or comments in terms of this particular report we're dealing with today. Councillor Andrew Brown, and then Councillor Jonathan Wheeler, and then Councillor John Clark.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to echo your comments regarding Becky and the team.
Andy, you just come closer to the mic, Andy. We're not getting your voice brilliantly.
Can you hear me okay now?
That's better.
Yeah. Just to echo your comments about Becky and the team, fantastic report. Well done to all the team. As usual, Becky, an outstanding job. Helen, several questions. Well, I'm going to just put it bluntly to begin with. And what I say, I'm not getting at you. I'm going to be, it's Ernst & Young, your company. The contract was originally for £23,909. And I just want to know how you can justify raising that to £87,814, an increase of £63,905. I run a business. If I signed a contract with my customers and suddenly increased my charges by that amount, I don't think I'd have any customers left. I just want to know what your answer is to that. And I know colleagues of mine will be asking further questions along those lines as well.
Just going to take comments and questions, Helen, from a couple of members and then bring you back rather than going backwards and forwards. So I'll bring in Councillor Jonathan Wheeler and John Clark, and then I'll allow Helen or Becky to come back and then see whether anybody else wants to contribute. Councillor Jonathan Wheeler.
Again, want to reinforce the comments about Becky and your entire team, Becky. Like I say, any comments to make now are to a negative fashion are not aimed at yourself or the team. Like I say, well, the job you do is amazing, and please thank the team on our behalf. I think just to build on Councillor Brown's comments, Chair, where this report's been delivered late, the accounts, as I say, there was a very inconvenient, especially around staffing, a time when our team are trying to obviously do all they can to support COVID and the services we deliver. We moved around the meeting to be able to do the accounts. That was delayed. The fact is we signed a contract, the delivery of the accounts, the contract has been missed, it's late, so in everything we should be asking for a refund, or not as opposed to costs going up. And of course, as you said earlier, this is taxpayers' money that we are being asked to spend, and money that we are potentially going to be putting forwards to Ernst & Young to deliver the services might come out of frontline services. And I don't want to have to say to taxpayers that they may have less frontline services because we've got an accounting firm who are trying it on, to be honest. They think they've got a closed market. I think they can charge what they like and in effect take us for mugs. And I think, and again, please, Helen, this is, I know you're here as representative, but please take this back to the people who make these decisions if it's not yourself, but it's not on. And, I think we have to be absolutely clear on that this is not acceptable for this increase to go up. From what you see on the report, and we all know with Becky and the team in there, we are in a good position. So I can't see where you're justified to increase the prices. If there was a lot of extra work, if we weren't where we need to be, you could perhaps understand, but the fact is we're not. So what I'd like is a breakdown of exactly why the price is going up, line by line, that we can consider in terms of, so you can break down exactly why your costs have gone up by this much. And then we can consider and go from there, but just be told money's going up and not to have the proper breakdown to justify, because again, we are accountable to our electorate and the taxpayer, rightly so. So if I'm asked why we are potentially agreeing for an extra 40-odd thousand, 50,000, 60,000 to go onto the fees, I need to be able to justify why, and I can't see justification, Chairman, unless anyone else wants to disagree and be on that point. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll bring in Councillor John Clark, and then Helen or Becky may want to come back. John?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. It's similar views to my colleagues there are looking through this, and I say this is nothing personal, Helen, at all against you. It just seems to be a system. I've just seen something on my iPad now that says the government is considering local audit system leader. I don't know, I can't get any further through into that, but there's obviously looking at other things. I can see there's a lot more work, Chair. The that's gone into this than when we've had previous audits. There's no doubt I have to be fair on this, but again, I cannot see the rise. Seems to me as if the ratepayer has been legally robbed. Significant rise. There's no doubt in that, and I think that's my main beef in it. But there's so much information here. There's so much. It reads for one who, if someone's religious looking at the Bible, it's similar to that. There's a lot of things in here that I hadn't seen before. So that we've obviously got more for this extra money, but I do think that the fee, and it is my opinion, that the fee, it suddenly shot up. Apparently, I'm told that. And the company went in, Ernst & Young went in with a very low fee across the country, and then increased it, which I don't think we could get out of, as far as I know. I mean, I wasn't at the finance meeting because of my wife's surgery, but in saying that, I think there needs to be some explanation from government. I see you've got it listed here on, was it 47,000 for changes in work required to address professional things, is audit scale fee 23,000, 16,000. You could probably go on forever and ever looking at that. But I think to the ordinary person in the street looking at it, I think, how the hell did you manage to get that? As Andrew said, running his business, and I've run business, if I suddenly put my prices up like that, we'd be well out of business. And I'm surprised I've been allowed to do it. But in general, I'm pleased with what we've got. I'm pleased with what our department's done. I'll make a few more comments when it comes to the actual budget itself about Becky and the way she conducts this authority's finance, which I think is excellent. But it's really confined, Chair, around that significant increase in those costs. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Helen, I don't know whether you want to reply to those three comments from members of the authority, and Becky, you may want to come in afterwards as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to reply, Councillor. I mean, I think they were all pretty much the same comment, so I'll try and reply to them all as one. So you are correct that obviously the amount that I've enclosed as fees within the report there on page 44 is a substantial increase on the scale fee as set by public sector audit appointments. Those of you who keep pace with the financial press will know that whilst you're right, I am a representative of Ernst & Young. It's the entire public sector audit profession which is under pressure with regards to the sustainability of the fees that have been allocated by PSAA. Just to give you a little bit more explanation, the 47,000 figure that I've included there. So public sector audit appointments have for some time now been trying to gain information as to where the scale fee ought to more reasonably be set in order to reflect the increasing regulatory pressure on auditors in terms of the amount of work required going up and up each and every year in order to satisfy the regulators in what is a very heavily regulated industry. And in order to get that view, they have asked auditors to come up with an assessment of where they believe the scale fee should more reasonably be set. We as a firm have done that by looking at the increased regulation that we are required to follow today, as opposed to 4 or 5 years ago when the bids were put in for the PSAA work. And in addition to that, we've layered on individual authority circumstances. So our experience with working with authorities, how prepared they are for audit, what risks there are within the financial statements, what their property portfolios are like, the extent to which we will need to involve specialists in the audit work, etc. So that's our assessment of where the scale fee in any given normal year would be realistically set at, which would be a figure of, if my maths are correct, just over £70,000. In addition, the PSAA contract provides for auditors to discuss with management locally any additional and specific one-off work in any given year that could never have been foreseen in the setting of any scale fee, regardless of what level that scale fee was set at. And this year, clearly with COVID and the additional considerations we've had to look at, as I've talked through earlier, as well as we had to set materiality lower due to the number of errors in the prior year, etc. There have been some one-off items which require us to do more work specifically. So that's the difference between those two numbers, if you like. So the proposition would not be that the scale fee would be 87,000 going forward. That 16 is specific to the current year of audit that we're talking to. Councillor Wheeler, you mentioned you wanted to see a detailed breakdown of how those figures have been derived. That's something that we do work through with Becky and the team, and it's a very mathematical exercise, particularly in regard to the scale fee variation of 16,000, where it's how many hours have been booked by relevant individuals to our code times by the rate that is embedded in the PSA contract rate. So those conversations and that transparency does exist already. And Councillor Clark, you mentioned that you had the perception that we can't get out of this, with I think the phrase you used. Well, in actual fact, this is for the PSA to determine. That's your contractual right under that arrangement. So even if Becky and I were to agree this fee level, which for the benefit of everyone here, we don't. Becky hasn't agreed to these fee levels, but even if we did, actually neither her nor myself are the final determinant of this. That's PSAA's role. So you are protected, if you like, in that sense by your contract with that organisation. I think that covered everything, but if anybody has any additional questions, happy to take them.
Thank you, Helen. I think Councillor Andrew Brown wants to come back. Councillor Andrew Brown, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Helen, could you confirm, please, you actually said the PSA asked the auditors to what their fees should be? Because if that's the case, that is correct. Asked me what my fee should be, I'd be happy to give them a double in price.
The PSAA are currently undertaking a consultation process, and that consultation process is open to both users of the external audit process as well as deliverers of the external audit process. So yes, they have asked for our opinion, but via their question, they also asked for the opinion of, the likes of yourself, authorities that receive the external audit services.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Saddington.
Thank you. Good morning, Helen. I just find this this baffling, actually. I always thought that when you you agreed to a contract, the contract to within a few pounds stayed as it was agreed. So for this to go up for such a huge amount, to me, an inexcusable amount, when did you make the authority? I was away having an operation, so I may have missed it. When did you make the authority aware of the fact that you were going to increase this amount of money to this extent? Because we're not talking about a few pounds, we're talking about thousands of pounds. And like Councillor Brown said, and Councillor Clark, anybody else would be out of work these days if they increase their money. You can't really blame COVID, else we might as well say that everybody's putting their prices up because of COVID. So could you explain it, please, when you told the authority, because I missed a couple of meetings, when you told the authority you were putting this price up?
So to take both elements of the price increase separately, the 47,000, which is my estimation of where the scale fee should be uplifted in order to make it sustainable, that was communicated in our audit plan, which was dated March 2020, so roughly a year ago. Now, given COVID, I am not sure the mechanism with which that got circulated to the committee, I believe, but didn't get presented until very recently due to the timing of reinstating virtual meetings. The second element, the 16,000 element, that's being presented to you today. That's being discussed with Becky separately in more detail, but that basically can't be determined until the work is completed, because that is a mathematical exercise of hours times rate. Until those hours have been incurred, I can have a guesstimate at the beginning, but that's not very useful impactful in terms of decision making for anyone. And typically, if I have a guesstimate in the beginning, somebody would come back and say to me, well, I don't know whether you did the hours or not yet, Helen. You're just going to fill up the hours because that's what you'd already smoothed the waters with earlier. So that's how that works, and that's the way that the contract provides for that scale P variation to work.
Well, I think most of us, if I could just come back, I think most of us on this authority would think that it was a guesstimate in the first place. Otherwise, it couldn't possibly be raised to this cost. So I would look upon it as a guesstimate in the first place.
Thank you, Sue. I'm going to bring in Police and Crime Commissioner Tipping, and then I'm going to draw this item to a close. We've got a very long agenda today and some really important issues to get through, and I think we spent a fair amount of time on this. Paddy?
So Helen and I know each other through the police service. Ernst & Young are our auditors too. I think it's fair to say, Michael, that this is a systems failure. The PSAA has squeezed too much money out of the system. They brought fees down by a very significant amount. And the result is that EY and the other tendering firms are in a tough position. I think Helen's made it clear that the PSAA are looking at the situation at the moment. I think we'll see the nominated fees rise. And I think the significant point to make, and it's a point that Helen's made, is that may be EY's projection of the increased fees, but it's got to be signed off by the PSAA. And I know of occasions not very far from here, just down the road, where the PSAA hasn't agreed the fee. So I don't think it's an issue just for Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. It's a bigger national issue that work is underway to try and resolve it.
Thank you, Paddy, and I'd concur with that. And you're right, it certainly isn't a Nottinghamshire issue. And as somebody who sits on the body that holds PSAA to account, I'm very familiar with the systematic problems. But notwithstanding that, this is clearly a gross exercise in moving the goalposts, because, as Councillor Saddington said, there was a fee that was put forward by Ernst & Young, and there's a fee that is now far higher than that, that it was, and we're answerable to our taxpayers at the end of the day, and with very limited resource. So, I hope that the conversations that I had with PSA result in a figure that is nowhere near the over 3 times amount. And I think I said at the Finance and Finance Committee that by no stretch of the imagination is any of this Helen's fault. You happen to work for Ernst & Young, Helen. You're not the person who sets the decision around this, but you do happen to be the messenger on behalf of Ernst & Young to the authority today. I'm going to move the recommendation for us in terms of this report, because I'm conscious we've got lots of other issues to deal with. The recommendation before us is that members note the contents of the external auditor's ISA 260 report attached at Appendix A. And I am also going to be moving a second recommendation in today's report, which is to record the authority's disappointment both as to the length of time taken to receive the external auditor's report and in respect of the disproportionate and unacceptable additional costs projected to be levied. And that recommendation is going to be seconded by Councillor Andrew Brown. You happy to second that, Andrew?
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to move those 2 recommendations to the vote. I'm going to read down the names for, against, or abstention. Councillor Michael Payne for both the recommendations. Councillor Toby Neal.
For.
Councillor Andrew Brown.
For.
Councillor John Clark.
For.
Councillor Sybil Fielding.
For.
Councillor Stephen Garner.
For.
Councillor Vaughan Hopewell.
For.
Councillor Javed Khalil.
For.
Councillor Gulnawaz Khan.
For.
Councillor John Longden.
For.
Councillor Salma Mumtaz.
For.
Councillor Mike Quigley.
For.
Councillor Shagufta Kudus.
For.
Councillor Nick Ray.
For.
Councillor Paris Imbiridis. I can see you voting for Parry. Councillor Jonathan Wheeler.
For.
Councillor Jason Zadrozny.
For.
Councillor Sue Saddington.
For.
Thank you very much. That's unanimous on both recommendations. Thank you, Helen, for your time today and for taking us comprehensively through the report, and hopefully the conversations with PSAA result in a satisfactory outcome for both ourselves and the taxpayer and everybody else concerned. And thank you, Becky, to you for the fantastic work of you and your team in relation to this. We're now going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is perhaps the main item on the agenda today, which is the budget proposals and issues in relation to the council tax to be levied for the year going forward. Becky?
Thank you, Chair. Right, so this is on page 191 of your pack, originally on item number 8. Members will have received the medium-term financial strategy back in November, where it was approved. Finance and Resources Committee have also considered a more detailed budget proposal back in January and recommended to Fire Authority a 1.95% increase in the council tax precept. Update of things that have happened since January. There's been a small amendment to the capital budget in the pack. It's slightly reduced just to an alignment of timings. Council tax and business rate projections from the billing authorities have been received. This was the major area of uncertainty previously, so it's been good to get those clarified. And the council tax largely held up a lot better than both myself and the billing authorities expected, and indeed did result in a small surplus for the collection funds, and a small increase in the council tax base of 0.2%. Business rates went the other way, so the income was expected to drop a little bit on there from last year. And so we'll cover that in a little bit more detail later on, but those two largely negated each other out, so we're in a similar position to that reported on the bottom line for Fire Authority. Points to note from the budget: I've included 1% pay award for both support staff and firefighters. Both of those are not approved yet. They will go through to their independent pay bodies. Any change in those will result in a change to the budget. A 1% change will have an impact of approximately £330,000. We've identified about £640,000 of savings in the budget, and those have been largely reinvested in services, mostly on-call, the on-call sustainability and training and ICT areas. Members will note from some of the tables in the report that we'll come on to in a little bit later on that we're very highly dependent on Section 31 grants in 21-22. So we've got the pensions grant that we receive of 2.4 million. We've got business rate support grant, and then council tax support grant, which are both propping up both the income from business rates and council tax. So that does present a risk going forward that those will not be in the base funding in future years. We've got the budget next week, so that will provide us some more clarity on the direction that the government intend to travel, and may give us some ideas on the spending review that we're expecting later in the year, that will cover 2022-23 to 2024-25. Hopefully that will give us some increased certainty over grant levels going forward. So, as I mentioned earlier, business rates is the area that I have probably the most concerns about at the moment. And we've assumed in the budget that the business rate holiday for retail and hospitality will continue into next year. I think we're likely to hear something in the budget next week about that. Business rate income has been particularly uncertain, both for 2021, which is, I think we're hearing that there's a risk of appeals from businesses due to material changes in circumstances as a result of COVID. So there is some uncertainty next year regarding that. And then in future years, the long-term impact of COVID on office and retail space could really have an impact on us. I've assumed in the budget a 5% drop in income for 22-23, but it could be worse than that in the future. Hopefully it won't be, but it could well be. There's a floors and ceiling mechanism in place, but that wouldn't kick in until the authority lost in the region of between £800 and £1,000 and £1 million. So it's quite a significant area of risk, and that I will be monitoring quite closely going forward. So if you move to page 205 of your pack on table 4, so this shows the budget position assuming a 1.95% council tax increase. It shows that 2021-22 we've managed to put ourselves in a balanced budget position, which is a really positive thing, given where we thought we could be earlier in the year. The deficit position in 22-23 to 2024-25 does depend on the economy, the spending review, the business rates, and the Section 31 grants that I've already talked about. So in section 2.67 onwards, there's a few paragraphs there which identify, gives you some figures around the risks there should those come in differently to the assumptions that I've made in the budget. So the deficit position, the 654,000 in 22-23, does reduce as collection rates are assumed to increase. So clearly, with that reducing, we've got the opportunity to look at using the reserves that we've got to cover us for short-term gaps. But obviously, as more information becomes available, I'll be watching that. Both John and myself will be watching those really carefully and identifying any need for making any future savings. And we'll be bringing, reporting back to you on that on a regular basis. So table 5. On page 206 shows the increases of the impact of a 1.95% increase in council tax. Takes a Band D property up from £81.36 to £82.95, which is an increase of £1.59. Also in their table, you'll know that most of the properties within Nottinghamshire are largely in Band A and Band B, and those figures are there before you for further information. So there's 2 other recommendations in the report. The first is increasing in fees and charges in line with inflation. We don't, the amount of income that we actually get, as you would expect, the majority of services that we do provide are free to the public, and we probably only get about £5,000. That's all the budget we've got for fees and charges. So it is just one-off items for over and above emergency work. And the other area for approval is the approval of members' allowances in line with the members' allowance scheme. So that would increase members' allowances in line with the National Joint Council, for the local government service. So that's it. I can take any questions. The recommendations are to approve a 1.95% council tax increase and to approve the precept level to be noted to the billing authorities, which are set out in Appendix C of the report, and then those fees and charges and the members' allowances. So I have any questions.
Thank you, Becky, and thanks for your work in putting together this budget. I think it's a positive budget that protects frontline services in a really difficult and uncertain time. Obviously, you're operating in a environment where, perhaps for understandable reasons, perhaps some people don't think it's understandable reasons, we're working effectively year to year because we've only had a 1-year settlement, and I think we all hope that there'll be a more sustainable settlement going forward, perhaps 3 or 4 year settlement from the Chancellor. But there are obviously lots of issues we're dealing with. As you said, business rates retention may come round the corner. The fair funding review, what impact will that have? what are the impacts of Brexit? You know, not a commentary on whether you voted for or leave, but what are the impacts of Brexit, and will that have an impact? There's obviously the budget next week by the Chancellor and a comprehensive spending review coming up. There's obviously also the stuff that that Police and Crime Commissioner Tipping referred to earlier about potential reform in the fire sector. So it's a period of uncertainty at the moment. There's lots of things in flux, potential decisions around pay, which perhaps will come later this year. Really pleased to see in this budget that has been cross-party, actually, and credit to Andy and his colleagues for the feeding they've put in, that we're covered if there is an outcome of an over 1% pay increase for those who have worked really hard throughout the pandemic. Or you know, tragically, yes, we've got to raise council tax by 1.95%. It is pence, though, in terms of the share of council tax bill that the fire authority levies to members of the public, and that pence increase from our residents will protect frontline services going forward, will allow us to continue to do the excellent work we're doing in supporting communities through the ongoing pandemic until it shifts, but also all the other really good work, the work around fire prevention and the inspections that are taking place on the higher rise buildings in the city, the really good work that's that's going on in the back office as well, to make sure that we're saving money and that we're efficient, and the work indeed that we're doing with our colleagues in the police and other organisations in terms of collaboration to save money. So I think this is a positive budget. Credit to you, Becky, and your team, but a personal thank you to Andy and his team, as well as my own colleagues from my own group and Councillor Zadrozny as well. You know, people have fed in an honest fashion. They've challenged back in the individual committees, and I think the work that's come through the different committees, HR, Community Safety, the Finance Committee, has led us to a really positive budget. So I'll open it up to the floor for any comments or questions for Becky. I propose that we take the two recommendations, which is the council tax and the precept levels, to be notified to the billing authorities together as items 1 or 2. They will need to be a recorded vote in accordance with legislation, and Malcolm Townrow, the clerk, will read out people's names and ask for your vote on that, because we do need to take a recorded vote on those two recommendations. And then I will take the latter two recommendations, the fees and charges and the members' allowances, which we have to do en bloc, which we'll just ask for a vote for. So I will open it up to the floor for any comments or questions. Councillor John Clark, as Chair of the Finance Committee.
Yes, thanks, Michael. I think you've probably covered, you've been reading my book here. You've covered most of the things there. But I think for all of us, we can moan for, and I will, and you will, and other people moan, 10 years of austerity and all the rest of it. But we just got on and done the job. And I think this goes right the way across the system. It's a real praise to Becky in particular and her team, because looking at this, we are in a reasonably sound condition. And I dare say a lot of other authorities and a lot of local authorities would like to be in such a healthy position. Doesn't mean it's brilliant, but it is there. So Becky, passing on our thanks there. It's what we probably call the new normal, is it this? And one of those things is, and Paddy can be pleased with this as well, because it seems to be to the person out there that it is seamless. These, I sit in a local authority building now, and there aren't a lot of staff, but the system's working. We're either working from home or we're working out there. Refuse people, fire people, police, and all the rest of it. All those sort of things thrown at them recently, and they've actually got on with the job. And I'm particularly pleased with the fire, the staff from the fire. They, if you ask them to do something, they try and find a way of doing these things. And again, they say with the police as well, because if we look at our own Herod Centre, which we started off as a hub right at the beginning of it, that's feeding people, with the food banks and everything else. So now it's a vaccination centre, also is lateral testing centres that we've got within the borough. In that, you'll find that there are police helping, there are fire members of the fire brigade helping. I just think it's, we've just got on with the job, and if we've argued in other areas. It is difficult. I hope at some point, the government in the future will recognise what we've been trying to do at a local level. It's not been easy, and dealing with some of this finance. And I back to the audit report there. I know we've criticised it. I know we've all criticised the cost. There's a hell of a lot of detail in that. And I think a lot of people that came in off the street and read those would start to understand some of it, apart from the fee, which we've already registered our protest on. But I'd like to back the recommendations there. Thank Becky, thank her team. I was going to thank her on all the other times, but you can thank on everything. It gets a bit like the Oscars where you thank the station cat and all the rest of them. But it really is heartfelt. Thank you to all those that keep us straight. There's one thing in life. Don't try and cheat the tax man or tax person, and make sure that everything is straight and above board, and we can hold our heads up high. Thank you.
Thanks, John, and thanks to you and your committee as well for the work, in bringing this all together. Andy, I can see you indicating. Councillor Andrew Brown.
Yeah, I'll keep it short because I know we're running short of time here. Yeah, great job, Becky. Thanks very much for your work as usual. Fully supported from my group. And yeah, John mentioned the taxpayer. Yeah, we have got to justify what we do to the taxpayer, and I think the budget shows that what we've been doing over the last 12 months, trying to save money here, there, and everywhere, to be in the position we're in. We're in quite a healthy position, probably envious of other authorities. When I've attended meetings on behalf of the authority with the LGA, talking to other fire authority across the country, we're in a good position. So well done, Becky and her team, and everybody else, right the way across. Fantastic, well done.
Thank you, Andy, and thanks for your support as well, and the support of your group. Councillor Toby Neal.
Yeah, I just want to say I think this has been a really thorough piece of work, and a lot of negotiations gone on amongst the groups, and Becky has produced something here that I think we can all stand behind. I'm particularly, given the fact that we seem to have to deal with stuff on a year-by-year basis rather than some serious long-term planning, I think some significant work has gone into this, and I'm very comfortable with where we are in terms of being on authority and being prepared for the future as well, because I think that's an important aspect of this. So I just want to say thank you. I do support this, and I do support, and I'm grateful for all of the input from everybody who's been involved in this.
Thanks, Toby, and thank you for your support as well as Vice Chair on this process, and thanks to John and his team as well as Becky's team for what I think is a really positive budget. Councillor Vaughan Hopewell.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Becky and the staff at the Fire and Rescue for presenting a very, very good budget. And I've no doubt that the people of Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, although we don't like increases, the very fact that this is such a small increase for the service that they get for the money that they provide to us, I think it's commendable that we should pass this forward. And I'm fairly confident that people will accept it with barely any at all moans and groans. And I say thank you very much for everything that Becky and her team has done.
Thank you, Vaughan. That feedback's very much appreciated. I'm not seeing anybody else indicating or waving at me. Please shout now if you are. I can't see anybody else. So I'm going to hand over to the clerk, and the clerk's going to take recommendations 1 and 2 together as a recorded vote. And then the clerk will pass back to me. Or actually, Malcolm, if you like, I'm happy for you to just take the 2 second, 3 and 4 recommendations together and do the same again. So we'll have 2 votes, a recorded vote on items recommendations 1 and 2, which is the council tax. So it's to agree the recommendation of the Finance and Resources Committee to the Fire Authority that there be a 1.95% council tax increase. And secondly, which will also be taken together in a recorded vote, to approve the 2021-22 precept level to be notified to the billing authorities based on the information set out in section 2 in Appendix C as required by statute. The clerk will then take a second vote, which can be recorded as well, given that we're online, which is to approve the fees and charges for 2021-22 as set out in Appendix D, and to approve the payment of members' allowances for 2021-22 in accordance with the approved scheme, which is essentially a standstill position. It's not any increase, but we do have to take a vote on that. I'll hand over to you, Clerk.
Thank you, Chair. So as I read out each name, if you could indicate for, against or abstain, please, in relation to recommendations 10.1 and 10.2. So Councillor Payne.
For.
Councillor Neal,
4.
Councillor Brown,
4.
Councillor Clark,
4.
Councillor Fielding,
4.
Councillor Garner,
4.
Councillor Hopewell,
4.
Councillor Khan,
4.
Councillor Khalil,
4.
Councillor Longdon,
4.
Councillor Mumtaz,
4.
Councillor Quigley,
4.
Councillor Caduce,
4.
Councillor Rain,
4.
Councillor Saddington,
I'm muted. 4.
thank you. Councillor Zimbaridis, thanks, I've got that as a 4. Councillor Wheeler
4.
and Councillor Zadrodzny.
4.
Thank you. And then moving on to items 10.3 and 10.4, the same again, please. Councillor Payne,
4.
Councillor Neal,
4.
Councillor Brown,
4.
Councillor Clark,
4.
Councillor Fielding,
4.
Councillor Garner,
4.
Councillor Hopewell,
4.
Councillor Khan,
4.
Councillor Khalil,
4.
Councillor Longdon,
4.
Councillor Mumtaz,
4.
Councillor Quigley,
4.
Councillor Caduce,
4.
Councillor Rain,
4.
Councillor Saddington,
4.
Councillor Zimbaridis,
4.
Councillor Wheeler
4.
and Councillor Zadrodzny.
4.
Thank you. Chair, all 4 recommendations were carried unanimously.
Thank you very much, Clark. Very much appreciated, and thank you to members for particularly for unanimous support for the budget and for the cross-party work that's gone into the budget. I think this is an example to other authorities around the country, so very much appreciated. And again, Becky, superb job, well done by you and your team, and to you, John, and your senior leadership team as well for the work in preparing this budget. The next item on the agenda is agenda item 10, which is the strategic plan year 3 strategic actions. And this is going to be introduced by our Assistant Chief Fire Officer, Candida Brudnell. Candida.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we're going sublime to ridiculous in terms of report length at this point in the agenda, going from some very hefty ones to a very short and hopefully sweet one that won't be controversial. It's just presented here for you to see before you the priorities that the strategic leadership team have developed over the past few months through a range of work which isn't documented at any length here, in order to bring us to this place where we can then deliver on the 3rd year of our current strategic plan. Now, some of these are organisationally focused priorities, some of them are frontline and delivery focused, but all of them are crafted with an eye to improving the delivery and the impact of our services on our communities. So I'm going to, if I may, just rattle through them quite quickly. I'm very conscious of time, and hopefully they're quite simply put for you in terms of the way the report has been constructed. So as I say, some of them are organisationally focused and some of them are more frontline. The first is around the planning work that is underway already, but will really need to gather speed and momentum over the next year in order for us to have a new strategic plan in place next year. And it's an important piece of work because it has to be crafted now in a way that fits with what HMI would be expecting of us. And we need to be able to demonstrate that all of the work that we deliver hangs upon our strategic plan. And so that work is now underway and is there as in 2.31. And the strategic risk assessment is currently taking place that will help us then shape that plan. And we'll be engaging thoroughly with members throughout and also with the community. 2.32 is around us properly embedding and making inclusion a mainstream part of what we do. There's a huge amount of activity around this agenda and a lot of tools and policy that we now have in place. But this work will be around making sure that the whole service is saturated and sees this as part of everything that we do every day in all areas. 2.33 is around business recovery, which is perhaps something that wouldn't have been anticipated in the past as a priority for us. These other ones are ones that you could have looked at our strategic plan and guessed, but this one is around making sure that we recover properly following the pandemic. And work is underway around this already, and this will be to make sure that we do that in a planned and effective way. The continuous improvement priority, the next one will be a combination of looking at our infrastructure and processes around performance management, but also about the culture in the organisation, where getting people to a point where they recognise that we can continuously learn and continuously improve by being very sharp around our performance management. The next three are focused on our delivery, our front line. The first one around the specialist response review. How that plays out will be dependent on what comes forward in our strategic risk assessment. And so, but we're ready, knowing that whatever comes out of that assessment, we then need to look at what our specialist response equipment is that we have in place. And the next two are around making sure that our on-call provision is sustainable, and this is an ongoing one. You'll be very familiar with it. So it's continuing the effort that has been going into making sure that our on-call service is sustainable. And one aspect of that is making sure that we have a really good and functioning rostering system across the whole of the service that's particularly important for our on-call staff. And then finally, last but not least, one around our whole agenda around collaboration, which again is reported here often and has been mentioned already several times through the meeting this morning. This year's focus will of course be predominantly on ensuring a successful transition to the new HQ up at Sherwood Lodge. But that's not to say there won't be other aspects of work around collaboration that will either emerge, depending perhaps on the new reforms that are coming forward, but certainly this is a place where we will make sure that this agenda has proper attention and has scrutiny through the year. And the 2.4 just says how we will be measuring this. So at that point, Chair, I'd just like to ask that the recommendations can be considered, but if anybody has any questions, of course.
Thank you very much, Candida, and thanks for your work on this. Really important in terms of the strategic plan and our priorities. And the report, I think, is a really good report and update. And thanks for the way in which you presented it today. Are there any questions or comments that people want to raise with Candida? I can see Councillor Neil and then Councillor Caduce. So I'll bring in Toby first and then Shagufta.
Thanks. It's a good report with a good summary of all the stuff in it, and I could ask some questions about all of them, but I'm not going to because I know we're limited on time. So just and really, I suppose this is more some questions, but I'm more than happy to have a later discussion about this and like to factor it in. So just picking on two things particularly, 2.3.2 and 2.33. So the inclusion agenda approach. So recruitment has sort of been put on hold in a large chunk, and I'd like to see how the inclusion agenda works around recruitment, particularly in the future, especially as we're going to have a new approach to this. And the same, and a really similar sort of question around the business recovery, understanding what exactly is being meant in terms of working communities going forward. I'm happy not to take an answer specifically at the moment, and maybe that we get this down to committees. I think there's a lot of really good work there. I'd like to have a closer look at those at some point when we got a bit more time to do that.
Absolutely. If I can come back, Chair, straight away.
Absolutely, I think it'd be really good. You know, this is a very succinct report, and there's a huge amount of work behind each of these, and I think we'd be happy. What I would say is not all recruitment has been put on hold, so there is a lot of recruitment that is still going on to make sure that our, in particular around whole time and on call, has been recruited to as planned. So, but yes, most definitely, I'm happy to take that away as an action to make sure that there's further briefing on those areas.
Thank you very much, Toby and candidate Shagufta.
I just wanted to add, as the chair of the HR committee, just how impressed I am with the inclusion agenda and the commitment to drive that forward. And I'm delighted to see that it's in this plan and that you've got that ambition to genuinely embed inclusion throughout the service. So I just wanted to add that as a commendation, really, and say thank you.
Thank you very much, Shagufta. I know that'll be very much appreciated by not just candidate, but the entire team as well. I think the fire service has always had and continues a very good story to tell about inclusion and diversity. And actually, I attended just a few short weeks ago an excellent event held not just for the fire service here, but services right across the country. And there were people from, you know, right down south, all the way up north, and east and west services joining in around transphobia. And I know that Damien's on the call with us. He attended the meeting, as well as did a number of other people, and it was an excellent event, a really, really good event, some really good speakers, some good stories. We heard from some of our own colleagues as well who had spoken out as role models in terms of LGBT History Month, and credit to all colleagues who were involved in organising that event. They all did a superb job, so please do pass on our thanks to that team, candidate. John Clark, I think, was indicating.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just like to ask on the collaborating. First, just make a statement. It is very clear report. 2.3.9 collaborating improve community outcomes. Have we got any planning to look at the move to police headquarters with the joint headquarters, or what they would call it? How are we going to scrutinise that as a committee? And because the people will ask that question, the press will ask the question. So did it work? You know, I know we've looked at it. We've looked at the potential of, you know, gaining some savings and everything else. How are we going to? How do the propose, you know, the officers bring a report to us that we can scrutinise that it's going smoothly? So it's sort of looking ahead, really. But I think we need that to report back. And to see how we've improved our community outcomes.
Thank you, candidate. Do you want to come back?
She's gone.
We have some scrutiny of governance arrangement that doesn't fit within the exactly within the formal structures that we have as the fire authority. So, and that is the collaboration delivery board that the Police and Crime Commissioner sits on, along with Councillor Payne and councillors. So councillors are having some scrutiny on it at a working level. I'd be more than happy to bring an interim report as we approach the time. So perhaps later in the summer, as we approach the time that we'll be getting ready to transition to the new build, and then later on an evaluation report once that transition has taken place. I think that would be entirely appropriate.
That's really helpful. That's really helpful, candidate. And yeah, just to reassure John, the authority obviously approved myself, Toby and Andy to sit on the Strategic Collaboration Board alongside Police and Crime Commissioner Tipping and colleagues from his office, as well as John Buckley and colleagues from John's team at the Fire Service. And I think it's fair to say there are some rigorous questions asked there, but I think an interim report, an update back at an appropriate time to the authority is a good idea, candidate, and a good question, John. I'm going to move the recommendations, conscious of people's time. It's that we note the content of this report, endorse the Year 3 strategic actions, and receive the annual statement of assurance for Year 2 outcomes at a later meeting in 2021. So I'm going to quickly run down the names in favour, against, or abstention. So myself, Councillor Michael Payne, 4. Councillor Toby Neal,
4.
Councillor Andrew Brown,
4.
Councillor John Clark,
4.
Councillor Sybil Fielding,
4.
Councillor Stephen Garner,
4.
Councillor Vaughan Hopewell,
4.
Councillor Javed Khalil,
4.
Councillor Gulnawaz Khan,
4.
Councillor John Longden,
4.
Councillor Selma Mumtaz.
4.
Councillor Mike Quigley. Councillor Mike Quigley. I'll come back to Mike. Councillor Shagufta Kudus. I can see she's voting in
4.
favour. Councillor Nick Rain.
4.
Councillor Parry Simbiridis.
4.
Yeah, thank you, Parry. Councillor Jonathan Wheeler.
4.
Councillor Jason Sadrosny.
4.
Thank you, Jason. Councillor Sue Saddington.
4.
Just come back to Mike. Councillor Mike Quigley. Are you there, Mike? Mike Quigley, you there? Councillor Quigley, you there, Mike? I'm not getting anything from Mike, but it's a unanimous decision. And if Councillor Quigley does rejoin the call, we'll make sure that his vote is recorded. It may be that he's not picking up the sound. I know people are having internet problems this morning. So if he rejoins, if he wants to just type in the chat, Andy, I don't know whether you can get a message to him, but if he wants to type in the chat.
Michael, I had trouble with my mute button.
No, it's all right, Mike. In favour,
No
Mike.
problem.
I presume you're voting in favour.
Yes.
Brilliant.
No
Thanks, Mike. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the service's response to COVID, the inspection report and update from HMIC FRS. Just before I introduce, I think John's going to introduce this report and the next few reports. Just to say, John, absolutely outstanding report and a reflection, I think, of what was said earlier about the amazing work that the service is doing and a real step forward from the previous inspection report we had. And I think you should all be very proud of the brilliant work in this report. But I'll hand over to you, John, to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, two parts to this paper in front of you today. One is to formally present the inspection outcomes specifically undertaken regarding COVID by the HMI. And bear in mind, that was of the period up to June of last year. That's so they looked at how our initial 3 or 4 months had gone. And then the other part is just to give you an update of where we are here and now today, so that you've got a full appreciation of what the service is engaged in. So the letter, it wasn't an actual inspection report we got from HMI, it's a letter, it's ungraded. However, they did look at everything we did around COVID, and they commented on our positive and constructive way of engaging, and they made an overall statement that the service responded well to the pandemic. And I think the report speaks for itself, but it particularly picks up on our business continuity arrangements, the way we've looked after our staff in both risk assessments, personal protective equipment, and that we put their welfare at the heart of our activity. They commented on our inclusion of trade unions in terms of business continuity management, so right at the design of systems and processes, trade union representatives were engaged and fully involved in that in a productive and positive way. We had excellent on-call availability, as was reported back to members, so our operational side was really strong, coupled with really low absence. We had excellent resilience and continue to have really, really good resilience as well throughout. They commented on our ability to conduct and continue with additional work, so prevention activities and fire protection activities in a risk-based way. We also ramped up our capacity with the joint inspection team in the city. We're able to increase capacity in those areas where it was safe to inspect, and also things like student accommodation inspections, which were empty at the time. So we flexed our resources to have the greatest impact. And all in all, they identified some really good practice here in Nottinghamshire, which, of course, you know, I'm extremely proud of. And one of those things specifically is 213 in the report, which commends the way that the authority acted as well, because they did speak to the chair at the time. It wasn't just looking at the operational side. And through the use of group leaders, the way we expedited authority-based decisions through the kind of emergency powers, and then very quickly realigned all business to go through policy and strategy, the regular briefings of group leaders, and therefore the particular inclusion of all the group members through that process. So again, they recognise that we very quickly got governance in place to ensure that oversight and scrutiny and full endorsement of activity was in place as well. I think Overall, our supportive partners with the LRF as well also recognised, and like I say, they said we responded well, so a really good outcome. Under 2.23, there were a couple of areas which they've advised us to consider, and that's to determine how we adopt the longer term work we've done. So certainly things like I do a regular briefing to staff via Teams now, and we'll continue with those things. Agile working, you've seen, is in one of the strategic priorities for next year, because we've been so easily able to adapt to remote working through the really good ICT infrastructure we've got. We see real benefits in continuing to push that change as well. So, we are already building into our future the positive things which have come out of COVID. It's very easy to understand all the bad stuff, but there has been some real positives which have come out of it as well. And also taking the ability to update our plans as well. So, as this third lockdown has come, we've been really well prepared for that. We've kind of taken it in a stride, really, and that learning will continue into the future. So that's about the letter. It's attached to the report. I know it was previously circulated to members as well, but a real ringing endorsement to us. It sets us in good stead for our next inspection, which will probably be towards the latter of this year or early into next year, in terms of how we prepare for that. And I'm really looking forward to showing the HMI on their return just how much we've improved as an organisation over the last couple of years since our first formal inspection. I think really helped with the COVID inspection. I think it's also important if I just now touch on what we are doing now, and if I can just use the whiz of technology, I'm just going to very quickly share my screen, and while I'm talking, hopefully you will see a backdrop of photographs, because I think a picture paints 1,000 words. Can you see that screen, members? Yeah, thank you. If I can just let that run in the background, just a little infographic around some of the great work staff have done. I don't think that's running for some reason. Right, for some reason that's won't run. Just bear with me 1 second. We've mentioned about the great work we've been doing, and certainly we've got 50 members of staff who are now stepped up and are supporting communities. Hopefully you can see that infographic I've just shared, which is an update to the one what you've got in your pack. And it was really nice to hear mentioned we'd done 11,000 vaccinations, and that was last week's data as we went to publish. And as you can see now, we're already up towards 17,000, and that is growing on a daily basis. And we've had a couple of members of staff who have now individually administered 1,000 vaccinations each. So, some of that kind of stuff is rolling out in our social media. But we've continued with the urgent care shifts with EMAS. We've continued with the medicine and food parcels, befriending calls as well, which is equally important in tackling some loneliness issues. We've now built 7 of the testing centres across the county. That's our team are going in there and physically building those, and then training the volunteers who are running those testing centres. And we've got a total of about 50 staff seconded out, which is the tip of the iceberg, because as has been mentioned earlier, the whole organisation is stepped in behind them to support them. So it's not just the ones who are out there right on the front line. There's a lot of staff doing some of the more local, softer work in communities. And then I'll pay credit to my managers as well, who are managing to hold all of that together while still delivering the priorities of the organisation. It is coming at a cost, though. From a financial point of view, we are very rapidly burning up the grant that government has given us, but we've not spent all of it, and some of that will be carried into next year. And we're hoping more money will be made available as well. But it's also taking an impact in terms of other works and priorities in the organisation. And I think you'll agree, we are meeting our statutory functions, but other stuff is being put on the back burner a little bit. Other things have been delayed slightly. But in reality, our communities need us in dealing with COVID. So, and I know that that's been endorsed through group leaders and the chair, that's where our priority and focus is, and that will remain wherever we are having such a significant impact. The report just seeks for you to formally receive the letter and I suppose really just endorse the work I'm doing on your behalf with the authority, flexing the capability and capacity of staff to engage in this work. it's also, I think, important for me to say I'm doing this under the auspices of the Fire and Rescue Services Act, Section 11, which effectively gives us powers to use our resources to support communities in the event of people being at risk from ill health or death. And of course, that's what's given us the legitimacy to do this. And therefore, our staff acting under my direction are acting within the purview of the Fire and Rescue Authority and all of their protections that they enjoy as employees, which are fully in place. So it's important you're aware of that as well. And I wasn't able to run the video show, unfortunately, with a few pictures, Michael, which would have helped because it shows you some of the testing centres, some vaccinations being given. I think the biggest thing it shows you is the smiles on the face of staff who are doing that, because I think that's you know, they are enjoying being able to make a difference. And I speak to them on a regular basis, one-to-one level for many of them, and they know they are having such a significant impact, and they feel like they are doing their part, as they rightly are, and as we are collectively as an authority. Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. And just reiterate what I said earlier, thanks to all the staff who certainly are ready, willing and able and doing an amazing job. The video, John, the slides, if we can get that just emailed out to all members after today's authority meeting. And the other thing it'd be really, really good on a periodic fashion is if the infographic that you showed could be updated and circulated to all elected members. Because if we can share that on our own councillor Facebook pages and in our own community groups, etc., online, that's going to get more and more exposure for the service in terms of the due recognition that all of our staff deserve for the amazing work that they're doing. And as you said, over and above their ordinary roles and the work that we're already doing to support communities in COVID, you know, so many are volunteering and going that one step further as well. So if we can do that, John, that would be appreciated by members of the authority. I've got Councillor Neil, then Councillor Khan, and then Councillor Brown wanting to come in on this report, and I've also got Councillor Caduce as well. So Councillor Neil.
Thanks, Michael. This is a really good report, and it's great to read some of the stuff in there. There's a lot to pick out, but I particularly like 2.3 about the ability to anticipate and mitigate risks, because I think it's, you know, it's a fundamental part of, you know, an organisation that has to think about difficult things for the future. And also, is it 2.21, John, where it talks about utilising, as Chief Fire Officer, utilising the capacity and capabilities to work with partners. Again, absolutely crucial to what we do. So on top of, you know, the really commendable work and activities and the volunteering that goes on with our staff, I just want to say thank you to the leadership of the fire service, because I think you've put yourself, you know, you've all put yourself out there. I also particularly want to mention that locally and on the ground, the support of the union in terms of trying to make sure that people can volunteer and do stuff has been really important. So I just, yeah, you know, it's a good report. It's good to read it. It's good to read about the methodologies in place. And I want to thank you and your team, John, and I want to thank the union for their involvement.
Thank you, Toby, and I would certainly support that, and I'm sure all colleagues would on the authority. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, John. It's a very good report. I'm very pleased with it, and it's really informative. And I've got a question here from booklet, page number 291, and third paragraph, the page 2.8. The inspection highlighted how fear prevention and protection activities have been undertaken by the service, but praised the use of COVID-19 grant funding to employ 4 additional members of staff to boost prevention capability. And I understand that these 4 employees are permanent. And if they are, and I'm really pleased that we got some more people into work. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, they're unfortunately only fixed term contracts. We've just agreed to extend them further because they had in the summer started to help us catch up with some of the home visits. Unfortunately, as lockdowns come, then of course that's pushing us even further back. So we are looking to extend them into next year. And meanwhile, they're undertaking some of the befriending calls, the signposting work, and some of the triage we're doing. So we're putting them to good use. And I suppose while ever we keep getting the grant funding from government and we're able to afford it, we will keep those staff in place. The idea over the longer term is we will get back to full capacity in our normal way, and we should no longer need those people in the organisation. But as very often happens when we take people on a fixed term contract, other roles appear in the organisation which we apply for, and we tend to attract and keep good people. So, you know, you never know, some of those people may end up with us for the longer term.
Brilliant. Thank you, John, and thanks, Gull. And absolutely right that we'll keep this constantly under review because the team's doing an absolutely superb job and important work, as you've highlighted, Gull. So it's great news that they're staying with us for a further period. And as you said, John, if we can find a future role for them and we continue to get the funding, then that'd be brilliant. Councillor Brown and then Councillor Caduce.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to send my thanks to John and his team for a fantastic report, and thank everybody involved in the COVID response, etc. It makes me immensely proud to have been part of Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. I should definitely miss it, but the reasons I've just given, well, I can't say thanks enough to everybody. On behalf of my community and everybody else's community from my side, thank you, John, and your team and all the staff for everything you've done. Immensely proud. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Shagufta.
Quick suggestion, Michael, really for you, is those members of staff who, for example, have administered over 1,000 vaccinations, could you as chair put them a thank you note on our behalf?
Yeah,
I appreciate you can't send a note to everyone, but those kind of the ones that have like done over 1,000 jabs, it'd be really lovely for them to get a letter from someone like yourself on our behalf. So it's a suggestion.
No, it's a great idea, Shagufta. And John and I have done a number of joint messages, and I know we did a video as well over the Christmas period. But on behalf of the entire authority, I really like the idea of us finding different ways to thank them for the amazing work they're doing. So yeah, we'll definitely take that away, Shagufta, and have a think about how the best way to do that is with a bit of a personal touch. I really like that idea. Councillor Longdon, I think, were you indicating, John?
Sorry, Chair, I'm going to hand on this thing. I'm just listening to everybody what's said. Totally agree. Now, someone like myself, believe it or not, I'm a high risk on this issue. I once had pneumonia, it's been to top rib, and load of inside threw them away. Didn't tell them what all the bits to throw away. I think too scared. So I understand the discipline and standards involved. I've already had my first jab. I'm on the high risk register. Might not see me, and I don't pander to it. I carry on normal. And my full congratulations for the work involved, the discipline and standards. When I work as a member, we all practice discipline and standards when we're out. We don't have a job. Let's set an example to everybody else out there. And that's what I'm reading here. First class example. Everybody who reads this, I see the amount of work involved, and then my full congratulations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. That would be really appreciated by the staff, John, and keep yourself safe and well as well. I know just how difficult it is for people who do fall into that clinically extremely vulnerable category. It's been a difficult year for particularly for those people, but for everybody. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else indicating, so I'm going to move the recommendations, which are that we formally receive the outcome letter on the thematic COVID-19 inspection, and that we endorse the Chief Officer's approach and use of fire and rescue resources to support the strategic joint agency community response to COVID-19. I'm not going to go around and take names on this because I think I'm hearing consensus. So can people either give me a thumbs up or use the raise hand button if they're wanting to vote in favour of the recommendations? I'm seeing that's a unanimous vote in favour of those recommendations. Thank you very much, everybody. So we'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is, just get past the letter on my iPad, which is the Emergency Services Network update. John, and this is you as well, agenda item 12.
Yeah, it is. I'll be very brief, Chair. I've really brought you this report because we were reporting this on this quarterly. and we said we would wait until the full business case was signed off and come back to you, but it was a year since then. Unfortunately, the full business case has yet to be signed off, and I suppose the report is really here to serve purpose that officers are still very much tuned into this programme of work. So this is a replacement of our radio system and national project across all emergency services. So as you know, Craig Parkin is regional lead for the area, and we've got Gavin Harris on, who is obviously our own head of ICT, very much involved in this. I don't expect to go into any details other than that we are expecting the closure of this project to be somewhere between June 2023 and February 2024. So that's the timescale. And transition for the East Midlands, we're hoping, is going to be at the end of 2022. So these are still significant time periods away. And also, I think we are now starting to see issues with our legacy equipment. So the equipment we are currently using. So we're making assessments around what potential costs there may be associated with maintaining those, as well as maintaining the resources in the place which are working on this project. You'll appreciate we can't just switch things off and on and off in terms of people. We are flexing that capacity to deal with other priorities in the organisation, of course, but I think it's just to really put it on the radar that we are sighted on the issues. It's still very much an ongoing issue for the sector and more widely across emergency services. And as and when anything significant arises, we will bring it through the formal committee structure. It just felt it had been such a long time since we'd raised it. I felt I needed to just give you a very, very quick update on where we are. The recommendation is only to note it, but really what I'm saying is we still are very close to this. We've got lots of eyes on it. As and when there are implications we know about, then we'll bring them forward to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, John, and thanks to Gavin and team as well for your involvement in this. I mean, it's the report, I think it can be taken as read. It's amazing, isn't it, how long this project's taking? But I mean, it is really critical project because, to get resilient and mission critical communications and to allow all the emergency services to be operating through voice and data, etc., in a closer fashion has to be something that is to the benefit of all of the communities we serve. So an important project, and I think the update is really welcome. Any comments or questions that people want to raise on the update on the emergency services network? No, the recommendation is to note the contents of the report. So I'm not going to go around. Again, just raise your hand if you're in favour,
Michael,
or use your raise hand button.
Sorry, Michael, was John? I think John was waving.
Yeah, just wanted to raise on the bottom there, 3.2. Although the new building at London Road more efficient to run, the annual savings of running costs are less than what was originally expected. It's just something to bear in mind when we're projecting in the future, say the new workshop station, when we look at those a bit more closely at the costs. We were told it was going to be this. It's turned out it's going to be less savings. So, although it's good, the savings are year in, year out.
John, that's the next item, John. That's on the next item. Yeah, next item.
I beg your pardon. I've flipped my page. Well, I'm saving for that one.
Yeah, no, but it's a good point. Just take a quick vote on the ESN. So all those in favour? And so, okay, now we'll just move on to the next item, which is the evaluation of Central Fire Station move to London Road, which I think John's introducing. And good question from Councillor Clark, John, which you can perhaps deal with up front.
Yeah, I will do, yeah. I'll cover that off, yeah, in terms of the finances. There's also Damien West is on the call because he's really the author of the detailed reports, what sit behind it. So detailed questions I'll direct in his way. That's also the same for the next report as well. Yeah, London Road Central, we first talked about this back in 2004 around relocation. And then again, it came back to the authority in 2011 in earnest in terms of an actual plan to do it. And that resulted in the move taking place in 2016. And for those of you around at the time, you'll know this linked with city redevelopment in terms of the centre of the city. And also it was linked to the way the road system was being changed and altered, the tram and, all the things which have happened, which started to make Shakespeare not the best place in terms of a fire station to be. And the idea was to look at moving it further towards that side of the city, which is what took place. I think it's also safe to say it was part of the regeneration of that side of the city. So the entrance in over the river and the city's plan to make that space look a lot better. And so when that building was built, we actually replaced what was some industrial units on that sort of main road in. So there was some other spin-off social benefit there as well. And also we created a station which right from the outset included the City Council emergency planning team, and subsequently has also now got the local beat team for the police there, and it's also a standby point for EMAS as well. So it truly is a multi-agency hub in both operational response and also business as well in terms of emergency planning there as well. The report identifies what's been the impact, because we said we would come back and do that. It has been slightly delayed by COVID. This has been one of those things put on the back burner for a few months. I mean, ideally you would have had this probably in spring of last year, or certainly probably straight after AGM. The act-in is basically we have maintained our operational response standard. There has been a slight increase overall of about 6 seconds on incident response, but in terms of overall standard, it's been maintained. There has been some knock-on effects as you'd expect around other stations, because obviously stations don't operate in isolation. They have an impact on other areas. As it's moved further towards the river, that's increased the number of incidents that Arnold and Stockhill now attend, but it's decreased the number of incidents West Bridgeford and Ifields attend because it's moved further towards those stations. But none of those are of huge consequence in terms of overwhelming stations, for etc. The numbers are still very tenable in terms of spreading the workload. So there's been no real impact. And of course, we're measuring from today's standard to what we were doing a few years ago. And I've said there's been quite a lot of infrastructure changes, you'll know yourselves in the city, the way the roads have changed, the impact the trams had. And so, we're not really measuring like for like. Coming to the finances, we actually delivered the project under budget. I think we saved around £600,000 on the estimated 5 million. It came in at 4.4 million. And yes, the savings are only £6,500 per annum on running costs. But on 3.4, we mentioned there that some of that impact is due to the rates we pay, which are 91,000, and we're currently challenging those, and we've challenged others where we have actually seen a positive feedback on one of those stations. So we're still hopeful we may see a challenge on those. And I think what's also important to say, when we undertook the feasibility study about Central, remaining in Central on Shakespeare Street would have had huge maintenance costs year on year. It needed a major refurb, as well as significant upgrade to things like its heating system. Obviously, it was an old building built in the 40s, very poor insulation, none of the kind of things that we've got in place at London Road, things like, EV in place and those issues. So annual running costs in terms of paying the bills only saving us 6,000. That masks the fact that we'd have had to have piled huge amounts of money into the maintenance of that premise. So over the longer term, I think we've been able to build a new fire station for free almost. I think when we go back to the feasibility study, the savings in the longer term, it was the best option by far. And I'll also add in the demographic change which is happening in the city and the road infrastructure, etc., which has changed, the multi agency hub that this station has become, which obviously Central wasn't. And then finally, part of the regeneration process into that part of the city. So there's lots to this project. We've got some benefit out of it, and the city's got some benefit out of it, but also our partners have in terms of that shared hub.
Brilliant, John, thank you. And let me just say as well, this report and the next report, Damien, absolutely cracking job. They're superb reports, very, very comprehensive. Lots and lots of detail here, all the sorts of questions anticipated that members would ask, and I think very transparent in the evaluation. So a superb job of both reports, Damien, really, really good work. And thank you, John, for presenting the report. Any comments or questions? I mean, I visited this station when it opened. I think it's a flagship building. There are clearly savings. It came in under budget, which has to be good. It's in a good strategic area in terms of responding for the city. But I think crucially for me, as you said, John, it's not just a fire station. It's a community hub. It's got great facilities for the staff down there in terms of exercise facilities and the space that they've got, but also is being used by community organisations, etc., who we're working closely with. So I think it's good, and I think it's also a credit to, we should say thank you to our property and estates team, who did a really, really good job, and always do a good job. And I think Councillor Fielding would attest to that in the time she's been on the authority, and I know they will do a good job in Worksop as well. So did anybody else want to come in and comment or question on this particular report? I'm not seeing any indications. The recommendation is that we note the contents of the report and that we receive updates on the full integrated risk management planning process during 2021-22 year. All those happy to vote in favour? I'm seeing that's a unanimous support for that those recommendations, that report. So the next one, in a similar vein, is implementation review of the sustainability strategy for 2020. You'll recall again, we made a commitment that we would bring a report back in relation to some of the changes that were made previously, and that report is now here before us as item 14 on the agenda. John, are you going to introduce this report?
Yes, I am, Chair. Thank you. Again, I think just take you back in time. We've talked a lot today around finances, and this is back in 2016 at the spending review, at the cusp of the spending review we had there, which identified savings or a gap to bridge in our budget, circa £4.5 million. So I think it's clear to say that when we were faced with making these changes, this wasn't about improving things. This was about how we as an organisation remove funds out of the frontline delivery, which was going to have the least impacted way. And you'll recall extensive public consultation on this particular piece of work around crewing at Ashfield and Retford. And so we said we would bring a review. This review is an interim review because as part of the previous report, as well as this one, we are undertaking a FICL review, strategic assessment of risk, and IRMP next year. That has been identified to you in the strategic priorities report earlier, and that will take a full county-wide view of fire cover. But it was important we just looked in isolation at the new crewing system we put in place and the direct changes which we've seen at Ashfield and at Retford as well. I think we anticipated, because we were going to shift nighttime cover from being whole-time crew to on-call crewing, we were anticipating an increased attendance time of 5 minutes. I'm pleased to say that that's not been the case, and that for Ashfield, that increase in attendance times has only been on average 2 minutes and 18 seconds, and at Retford it's fell just 6 seconds short at 4 minutes and 54 seconds. But I say that was on the basis of anticipating it was going to be 5 minutes, but that's not proved. So it's been slightly better than we anticipated, significantly better at Ashfield. And also it's important to say that our response standard of 8 minutes is still being met. So again, that kind of shows that the changes we made here were probably the right ones in terms of the overall, recognising the overall negative impact it was going to have on the service. We've done it in the least impactful way and been able to maintain our response standard of 7 minutes and 48. A big part of the work doing at those stations is to increase the on-call staffing at those stations, and what we have managed to do at Retford is increase it from 11 to 14 personnel, and we're still ongoing with continual recruitment, and we've managed to maintain the numbers at Ashfield, and that's in the face of actually quite a high turnover of people reaching a kind of normal retirement age at Ashfield, but we have maintained the numbers. However, across both services with the same numbers at Ashfield, we have increased availability. So the availability of the on-call at those stations has improved, even though the actual numbers haven't. So, and that's testament and credit to the local crews there. I think it's also important to say that at Ashfield, for 70% of the time, both appliances have been available, and at least for 94% of the time, an appliance has been available from that station. At Retford, it's not quite as strong, but we knew it was going to be in a weaker position. For 45% of the time, there's been 2 appliances available, and for just 89% of the time, there has always been fire cover available at Retford. So we do recognise that 11% of the time, and that comes mainly at pinch points for our on-call around beginning and end of a normal working day. What I would say, though, is where we do have assets that are not available, we automatically put cover-up moves to make sure that there is an appropriate level fire cover in all areas of the county. So you'll be well aware that some of our on-call stations, although it's improved significantly over this last year, and a lot are over 90% available, some are down at the 60-70% time. And occasions we tolerate that. Other occasions we move resources around to make sure we've got a good geographical spread of fire cover, and that's exactly the same as what takes place at Ashfield and Retford. It's not the case that the local fire station is the only asset that serves that community. All of our assets serve all of our communities in a very kind of measured and managed way. A few issues have been highlighted from a staffing side of it. Bear in mind, we put a new crewing system in place, which removed the need to work night shifts, which has been seen as a positive. However, there are some issues which have raised from workforce around shift length and timing and shift, and we have agreed to look at that in more detail. And I think the final point I'll make is that we set off with an expectation, this is in 3.2, of saving 1.12 million. The actual outturn has been 1.18 million. Now, I don't really want to celebrate that as too much of a success, because I would rather put that £60,000 back into the on-call budget for those stations and increase the numbers. And so that is certainly still the longer term aspiration. And as with the previous report, this will all be collected up as we go through the strategic assessment of risk and fire cover review and IRMP process over the next year to look at a total kind of operational response. And we will look at, through that process, potentially tweaking shift length, hours, etc. at these stations to see if we can improve the outcomes, both for communities but also for our staff. And I think I'll leave it there, Chair, in terms of the overall summary from myself.
Thank you, John. Very much appreciated. Again, a comprehensive report. The recommendations are that we note the contents of the report and that we receive updates on the full integrated risk management plan process during the 2021-22 year. Any comments or questions in relation to this report? Jason, Jason?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, I don't want to break the loving we've had so far on this meeting.
I've lost you, Jason. I've lost your sound, Jason. I'll just see whether Jason's sound reconnects. Does anybody else want to ask any comments or questions on this particular report?
Yeah, if I may.
Councillor Quigley, and then I'll come back to you, Jason, because we've just lost your sound. Mike?
Yeah, just an issue about Retford. I mean, having living in the area and passing that way, I think one of the issues that causes the bigger increase at Retford is the location of the station. It's unfortunate that we ended up having to build or rebuild the station on the same site, because it's a one in, one out road to a very busy area of town. And I think the staff probably have a more difficulty in reaching the station than they would at Ashfield, which is quite an open area and easier to get to.
Thanks, Mike. I'll bring John back in a moment. Jason, can you hear us now? We just lost your sound, Jason, as you started speaking.
I can hear you perfectly. I don't know if you can hear me now.
Yeah, we've got you, Jason. Yeah, go on.
All right. So, yeah, just I was saying I didn't want to break the love in. And just before we just go on to that, I was going to say this is my first budget in 14 years where I've not been in charge of something and voted for a council tax rise. So I think that's quite important. It shows how much we value the service at the moment and things that our teams are doing. However, I think members are aware of my strong views on mixed crewing and what the effect has had on Ashfield. And I'd just like to ask John, I mean, I think we all know the implications. 2 minutes, 18 seconds doesn't sound like a long time, but adding that onto call time of already 6 or 7 minutes for part of my district is probably the difference between life and death in some cases, particularly with smoke inhalation, if it is an actual fire or an RTA. So I have grave concerns about that. But my biggest concern is that our neighbouring authority is looking at reducing some of their services, particularly at Alfreton, which we rely on in my part of Ashfield. And if that does go, I'm wondering what the implications are for the Ashfield area, that stretch of the motorway from sort of 27 to 29 that we police there from the Ashfield station as well. I think it could have some significant implications, and I'm just hoping that John's planning a little bit ahead in case Derbyshire make those decisions. Chair, thank you.
Thanks, Jason. And I think the point's well made by both you and Mike Quigley. And indeed, we've got, John may want to cover this, but we've got the review of the IRMP coming up, John. So some of these issues presumably will be picked up. But I think having that local knowledge and feedback early on from yourself, Jason, and from Mike is very helpful as we move towards that. John, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, briefly, just on Councillor Quigley's point, yes, around Retford, every time we look at stations, we do a full feasibility study, and that will always consider if we can relocate or not and the impact that's going to have. And, at that time, the best option available to us was rebuild on site. And there's always pros and cons if you move a site. And some of that is about proximity of where your on-call staff currently live, as well as access egress points and also where your risk is. So I take that point fully. There's always a compromise when we identify a location. We're going through exactly that same thing now regarding Worksop. So, that is actually moving. It's on a second choice site because the other site not fit for purpose. So there's always an element to compromise in. It's something we do consider significantly in those studies that the estates team take on board. In terms of Councillor Drosny, yes, of course, we work very closely with Derbyshire now. We have a seamless operational border with Derbyshire and Leicestershire through Tri-Service Control. So quite rightly, assets go over the border seamlessly. It's not an invisible border. And if the closest appliance, most appropriate appliance is Derbyshire to Nottinghamshire incident, and Derbyshire respond, and vice versa. And we work very closely with Derbyshire around our RMPs. And we actually have a view through collaboration with them to align our RMPs going forward. The timing at the minute, we can't quite do it because they concluded theirs and we just weren't ready to. But we are looking to align them going forward so that we do them together, recognising the quite significant operational border we have between them. But of course, we're a full consultee with Derbyshire, and if they do look to reducing their cover in Alfreton, then we'll strongly make representation about that. And I'm sure we'll work with them to find the appropriate resolution to it.
Thank you, John. Jason, Mike, does that address got a thumbs up from Jason? Thanks, Jason. I think Mike's fine with that response as well. Thank you, John. I'm going to move the recommendations, note the contents of the report and receive the updates on the full integrated risk management planning process during the 2021-22 year. All those in favour? Yeah, okay, the recommendations are supported, it's unanimous. We've now got the committee outcomes, which are here to note. Any of the individual committee chairs wanting to raise any issues from the committee outcomes? I'm not seeing any particular indication. Oh, sorry, yeah, Councillor Rain.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I just wanted to highlight something on page 392 from my committee. I chair the Community Safety Committee, and it's a bit of praise, really. It's the work of JATE, or the Joint Audit and Inspection Team, in terms of working together with the City Council and inspecting buildings that we've been doing since under Grenfell. And if members have had a look at that, but so far, I think it's an a good example of excellent partnership working, and I believe 100 inspections have been undertaken so far, which is remarkable progress, of which 47% has been issues that we've left to do with safety. And I think a lot of praise should go to the team, both the Fire Authority and the Council, for the work that we've done and the performance and results that's led to for local people, making it buildings safe. So I wanted to highlight that, and obviously thank our colleagues and staff for all the hard work that they've been doing, full stop, and Damien for a very thorough report. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Nick. And I think we definitely echo that the issues around high rise and building safety are absolutely critical, and the work of the joint audit inspection team, as you said, over 100 premises is brilliant. So yeah, we'll certainly echo that, and lots of collaboration with the City Council, which I know Councillor Neil keeps a very close eye on, and Craig and Damien and others doing a lot of good work with our colleagues. So thank you to the team for that brilliant work. People happy to note the committee outcomes? Yeah, they're agreed. Okay, we will now move to, I think, the final item, just scrolling back up, which is to go to closed session, I think. Yes, exclusion of the public. So item 16, to consider excluding the public from the meeting during consideration of the following item in accordance with section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 under Schedule 12A Part 1, on the basis that, having regard to all circumstances, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. So I'll move that. People happy to support that?